Good morning, everybody. If I could ask that we come to order, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. We have a quorum, and I will call the third meeting of the Executive Committee to order. If I could just, thank you so much. Just say I'm sorry that we were started a little bit late, but within the permitted time. But there are two important days to note today, and we have one. We have many special visitors. You're all special, but we have one special visitor I want to acknowledge. Today is not only the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, which I think in these times is especially important for us to acknowledge and recognize here at the Executive Committee, but it's also World Down Syndrome Day, and some of us were outside for the first ever flag raising at Toronto City Hall to acknowledge these very joyful, especially the young people who are here today, but many others as well, and their families to bring attention to that. And so I wanted to just make sure that I tried to help them accomplish their purpose by mentioning it here as well, but it contributed to us starting a little bit late. And in terms of the visitor, I think I'm making an acknowledgement here that I can't necessarily see that for, but I think I see a former mayor here, John Sewell, and I would always want to acknowledge the presence of a former mayor. And we also have with us MPP Chris Glover, who is here with us today as well. So, Chris. So may I begin, as we do, by acknowledging the land we're meeting on as the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. And we also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. You can watch us, for people who are not able to be here in person, on YouTube at Toronto City Council Live, or follow the meeting on your computer, tablet, or smartphone at www.toronto.ca/council. Now, may I ask first, as we're required to do, are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? And if so, please indicate the item number and the nature of the interest. And again, I'll remind members that, as I do, that when you declare an interest now under the MCIA, you're also required to file a written declaration with the clerk, and those are available. The forms are available should you need one. Are there any declarations of interest that people wish to make at this time? Okay, hearing none, may I then have a motion to confirm the minutes of the Executive Committee meeting held on January the 23rd, 2019, and the special meeting of the Executive Committee held on March 4th, 2019. Moved by Councillor Ainsley. All those in favour? Opposed? Carried. We have 13 items on the agenda today, and one thing I would like to do is to ask you, before we deal with those, to consider a motion that I'm going to move that the Executive Committee consider item EX 3.1, headed Engagement with the Province on Toronto's Transit System, first quarter 2019 status report, and item EX 3.12, headed Save Our Subway, Ensuring Torontonians Know the Facts, to have those matters considered together. And secondly, to have your concurrence that speakers who have not pre-registered on items EX 3.1 or item EX 3.12 be allowed to register to speak until 10 a.m. on March 21st, 2019, after which no further registration is allowed until the speakers list, and the speakers list as of then will be closed. May I have a motion? I've moved that. May I have your concurrence? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right, let's have a look at the agenda, and if there are items that you wish to hold, please let me know, and I will hold items with registered speakers. And that applies to item 3.1, the engagement of Toronto's transit system, first quarter 2019 status report. There are deputations, so it's held. Item EX 3.2, results of paramedics' interest arbitration with Toronto Civic Employees Union. Moved by Councillor Nunziata. All those in favour? Opposed? Carried. Item EX 3.3, administrative inquiry on hate-sponsored rallies, is being held for deputations. Item, as well as item 3.3A. Item 3.4, recommended Toronto City Council advisory bodies, is being held for deputations. Item 3.5, administrative amendments to reserve fund accounts. If there's no hold on that, it's moved by Councillor Crawford. All those in favour? Opposed? Carried. Item 3.6, creating new affordable rental homes and long-term care for seniors at 640 Lansdowne Avenue. You want to hold that or move it?
No, I'll move it right away. Just want to thank staff for the great work, and Magellan, a nonprofit organization that would be running the long-term care and the new affordable housing on the site. So.
And thank you for thanking the staff, and I will thank you for your leadership, Deputy Mayor Bylaw, as well. That matter has been moved. Item 3.6, 640 Lansdowne. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item EX 3.7, delegation of authority for temporary liquor licenses. Seeing no one wishing to hold it, may I have a mover of this item, 3.7, moved by Councillor Ainsley. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item 3.8, EX 3.8, renewing the city's commitment to Toronto Global is being held for deputations. Item EX 3.9, exhibition place, financial bylaw 218, and borrowing and investing of money bylaw 318. There are no deputations, and if I see no holds, I'll ask someone to move the item. Moved by Councillor Nunziata. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item EX 3.10, Toronto Police Service 2017 Annual Statistical Report is being held for a deputation. Item EX 3.11, the Toronto Zoo Lumina Experience is being held for a deputation. Item EX 3.12, which is being considered together with 3.1, Save Our Subway, Ensuring Torontonians Know the Facts, is being held for deputations. And finally, item EX 3.13, Request for Report to Protect and Enhance the Integrity of the Civic Appointments Process, that is not being held for deputations. Is there anyone wishing to hold it? Otherwise, I'll ask for a motion, which I've received from Councillor Crawford. All those in favor? Now, come on, you have to put some effort into this. All those in favor, opposed, carried. I would have voted for it. It would have been 1-0, but having said that, thank you very much. Okay. So we've moved and accepted the consideration of the first item and the, I think it was the 12th item together. And so we will hear the deputations first together for all those who've registered to depute. I don't yet have, I guess I have it right here. The list of those who are registered to depute. So what we'll do is, there's some overlap here. We will hear in order from the people that are registered on 3.1, and then we'll move to hear those on 3.12. And since we're hearing them together, I think we'll hear people once. There are just a couple of people that are registered for both items, but we're hearing them together. So that would mean we would start with Patricia Burke-Wood, please. Good morning, Ms. Burke-Wood. I think you know the rules here. You have 5 minutes, and the clock you can see over there and behind you. And then there may be some questions after that, but please proceed. Thank you for coming.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and members of the committee. So my name is Tricia Wood. I'm a Toronto resident, and I'm a tenured professor of geography at York University. I also write an urban affairs column for spacing.com, and I ride the TTC almost daily. I am deputing today on behalf of the transit advocacy group Code Red TO. Code Red TO is a consciously nonpartisan, volunteer-run organization independent of any conflicts of interest with transit agencies, political parties, labor organizations, or any related sector. We advocate for better transit options, evidence-based planning, good governance, and better funding. Our focus is research and the public dissemination of accurate and complete information about all aspects of transit. So we have two primary concerns to share today. First, the proposal itself and the process of negotiations do not yet represent good governance practices. And second, while we recognize the city's efforts to do otherwise, the ownership discussion is displacing the more urgent question of improving the overall funding structure for the TTC, not only for capital expansion projects, but for maintaining and improving operations appropriate to its ridership. In our recent report, Mixed Signals, came out last November, we studied the transit fares, networks, budgets, and governance of Toronto and 7 other large cities in Canada and the United States. The TTC is one of the most successful transit systems in Canada and the US. It's a leader in its region and far beyond. It moves twice as many people as Chicago on approximately the same operating budget. And outside of New York, no other city comes close to the City of Toronto's success in reducing car use to just 50% of commuters. However, our research also shows that Toronto's transit has major problems compared to these other cities: lack of independence from political interference, over-reliance on the fare box, and extremely low spending per rider. But the TTC's problems are not due to the level of government. The city has made poor choices, but Queen's Park is also responsible for plenty of poor and costly choices. To transfer ownership from the larger, more experienced, complex agency to a smaller, less experienced agency is a logic that thus far escapes us. And what we don't want is a tug of war. The other place that has such an arrangement is New York City, where the state is largely in charge of the subway and the city is in charge of the bus. And everyone agrees that its governance is a mess, and it's left it in a state of paralysis with a maintenance and improvement backlog of $100 billion, and those are American dollars. Disassembling the TTC or changing who owns it is not the way to solve our problems. Some cities have exclusive oversight of their transit agencies, and some don't. The real difference is almost every other city has something that we don't: dedicated, predictable revenue sources. That lack of funding structure prevents the TTC from investing properly and creates the multi-billion-dollar backlog that, as yet, Council has still chosen to avoid reducing for nearly a decade. Transit is not a political prop, and this is not just a business deal. One of the most important things that transit does is increase economic participation and reduce inequality, and another is its role in reducing our carbon footprint. Transit is a social justice issue and an environmental issue, and Council has an obligation to protect it. But instead, we are talking about disassembling the integrated TTC network, and that's not good transit governance. It's not good governance to move decision-making away from the city, a city with a stronger record than the province and every other city in Canada in getting people to ride transit. Holding discussions about governance behind closed doors and refusing to release reports paid for by the public about publicly owned institutions are not good governance. The city should insist on the release of Michael Lindsay's report, full disclosure of all materials, and hold public meetings and public consultation with experts and residents that explicitly inform any negotiations. And it's not good enough to invite public comment when the public is not provided with all relevant information. So on behalf of its 2.8 million residents, the city must defend its own interests as a corporation and as a local government. We need an extensive public conversation here, and we hope that you will insist on nothing less. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll have some questions for you, and we start the way it works is we start with some members of council who are not members of this committee, and then go on and see if there are questions from the committee members. So we thank you for your patience, and we'll start with Councillor Perks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tricia, so if I understood your last comment, you were saying that consultation without access to information is not really consultation. Am I correct in that?
Yes.
So if, as City Council has voted to do, we want to consult the public, the consultation can only be meaningful if we make available all the information that is under consideration in the negotiation between the city and the province.
Right. I mean, you want both the I think, consultation with the general public, because quite a lot of the general public in the city is quite engaged on this issue. Millions ride the TTC every day. But also, Toronto has a slightly extraordinary amount of urban expertise, not just in universities like mine, but across the city. And it's really foolish not to engage and benefit from that. But just a general public consultation of kind of what do you think of what we might be doing, it doesn't really inform the negotiations as it could. If we don't know what actual concrete plans are, we're not really commenting on anything specific.
Right. And I've seen, you know, there are some ideas here that are in the report. Let's suppose that we do get to a position where we've told the province, no, you have to put your cards on the table and we have to share them with the public, and we similarly put our cards on the table. To make the consultation robust after that happens, would you rely on just opinion polling, or would you want something different than that?
Oh, no, I think we want to go well beyond opinion polling. I mean, opinion polling can help sort of frame some of the discussions that might be organized. But no, I mean, I know a proposal to have some kind of expert advisory panel that could be useful, but you could also have you know, kind of stakeholder consultations, the practice that already exists in transportation planning already at the city, where you engage communities that are interested and have a stake in this, as well as experts. But yes, no, you want to go well beyond polling. Polling is at best a first step.
And finally, the City of Toronto Council has taken a position that we shouldn't upload it. And I heard something in what you said about the conversation isn't so much about who runs it, but whether or not we fund it. Could you tell me a little more about that?
Well, that there are multiple issues, and funding is actually part of governance because we don't have as much independence in governance because we're so reliant sort of year after year and begging for funding. But I think what we're trying to say is that ownership matters. It's not an irrelevant question, but it isn't the only question here. Who makes decisions, whether the TTC is adequately funded because it currently isn't. Those are also critical questions, and in some ways they are more urgent questions for the city. We should, if we had, as we do, limited time and energy, Code Red TO would much rather see the parties engage in a conversation about how are we going to have a long-term planning. And it's in the city's interest. I mean, I saw I think it's the city manager's report to council a week or two ago, you know, that says we want to have that conversation. But I think that's also part of what we're seeing, is that there really is a need to have a thorough conversation, not only among, you know, between the council and the province, but, you know, with engaging the public of the city, but to have a conversation about how best to operate the TTC, to fund it, and to make plans and to coordinate within the region. And this could be an opportunity to have that conversation, but it isn't yet, right? It's been brought to us kind of as a fight, right? The province says, well, we're going to do this. City council passes a motion, says, well, we'd really rather not. And the province says, well, we're going to anyway. So at the moment, it's not really an invitation to have this serious, extensive conversation and consultation that it could be. And so if it is going to happen, which is what we need, it's really, I think, unfairly perhaps, but it's really on the city to take that conversation to the province.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perks. Did I see Councillor Carroll for some questions? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. You referenced specifically the public currently not having access to Michael Lindsay's report that is advising the government, and I would assume the discussion for all parties that are in that discussion. One could say that an organization like Code Red wants that report to have some sort of gotcha moment if they're looking at that report. But I wanted to just put it in the context of one of my colleagues, a councillor, wrote an op-ed in The Sun, and he wraps it up by saying, today we have an opportunity to engage in a dialogue and work cooperatively with the province to build transit that works for all Torontonians. We should take it. So if you have the access to that information, if you're fully informed as you go into consultations, is Code Red an organization that with that report in hand is willing to do exactly that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as we said, when we studied the governance structures of all these other cities, there's no one model, right? So we wouldn't say, well, the city has to own it, or the province has to own it, and that will be, you know, the perfect outcome. What we really want to have is a very serious and detailed conversation about the plan. Actually, I would say that Code Red TO is not looking for a gotcha moment. Code Red TO is just about the public dissemination of complete and accurate information, not rumors, not anticipation of gotcha, and not seeking the gotcha moments.
Right.
To have a real conversation about how we really do this. And while I welcome Councillor Ford's comments about this as an opportunity, I would say it's not yet that opportunity. Yet. But we could make it so, but not with the process that we're following so far.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Carroll. Any other members visiting us from City Council that are not members of the committee wanting to ask questions? All right, then we can move to committee members. And first up, I had Deputy Mayor Councillor Michael Thompson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Ms. Wood. Thank you very much for being here this morning, and I will start off by simply saying that I agree with the comments that you have made, particularly as it relates to having information so that we can make informed decisions and not taking a position with respect to, is this the right way or is this the wrong way, but at least let's have the information so we can, you know, make decisions that are appropriate decisions. But in your comments, you mentioned that the issue around the good governance, you were not satisfied with that based on what we have here. I'm wondering if you could perhaps just extend on that and perhaps highlight some of the things or features that we should be incorporating, which is not incorporated in the report as it is now.
So I think the list of items under public consultation, the biggest gap is what you've noted already. having any kind of open public meetings, especially rather than stakeholder meetings or polling, again, in the absence of the actual, proposed plans, is not good governance. You're asking people to, you're asking people to speak to principles and ideas, but when it comes to governance models for transit, there is no one size fits all. They very much are organic historical structures that develop out of the specific, demography, population distribution, history, and physical geography of a particular place. It has everything to do with, for example, what the relationship is between the city and the province. Like, that's the context in which we're trying to negotiate, and we have to be very honest about what the status of that relationship is like. So there are things that we can say about them, but there's really quite a limit in terms of a good governance practice of really engaging democratically, right, with both experts and the general public, if you're just asking them to speculate on kind of, well, what might we do? I mean, you could ask me what might we do. I could talk to you for hours about possibilities, right? But that's not really valuable. It's much more valuable to say, here are some realistic things we can do. What works or doesn't work about them given who we are, where we are right now.
Right. So you've looked at, and I've gathered your group has looked at the terms of reference. Mm-hmm. Are you satisfied with respect to the information that's contained in the terms of reference as such? Are there some additional elements that we should be including that? And I realize what you just stated about the collection of information and data and access to that and so on, how important that is.
Yeah.
And I guess the other sort of little final part of my question, we at the city here are also in a position where we're not driving the train, so to speak. It's being driven for us to a large extent, and we are trying to do the best in terms of managing a difficult situation to get to a point, I think, which is a sweet spot, which I think you've arrived at, where we need to get to in order to make decisions. So I guess on the terms of reference, are there some additional things that, perhaps things that we're missing, or is there some gaps?
I mean, broadly speaking, no, because parts of it are quite open-ended, and certainly the city's interpretation of them is quite open-ended. I think the key aspects of the process of negotiations that we struggle with in terms of good democratic practices are the absence of full and complete information, and then meetings that are they're not open to the public. We don't know what the discussion, how things are going, basically.
Right.
I think those are the key aspects.
And now, I guess my final question to you, Ms. Wood. The city manager is recommending that we allocate a certain amount of funds, which is $2 million, to be able to provide staffing and third-party analysis and so on. I'm just wondering, is there anything that's lacking in that from your perspective in terms of, are there any additional elements that we should include in that as part of our process?
I mean, I don't think so. I don't know. I understand the IMFG has been tasked with putting together some kind of an advisory group or panel, and I don't know any further details than what's in the report. It certainly potentially sounds useful and appropriate to the city.
Okay, thank you very much. And no further questions, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Thompson. Any other? I have a couple of questions if no one else does. Thank you again for being here and for your patience. First of all, would you accept, and sometimes these things happen a bit out of order, but I think you'll hear that, I don't want to put words in his mouth, the city manager say later that in the context of the discussions where he is our lead participant at the table with the province, there has been no plan presented as yet. It's not as if they came into the room and said, here, this is the plan, now let's talk about it. Would you accept that if that is possibly the case, that when we have these discussions pursuant to the terms of reference, which I'll come back to in a moment, that that there is no plan as yet?
Well, I think that there's been no plan presented, at least publicly, but I don't believe that Michael Lindsay's report is empty and without at least concrete ideas about what we might do. That was what he was tasked to do.
But in anticipation of what the city manager will tell us later, I'm sure when he's asked questions, you would accept the fact that it's possible that Mr. Lindsay and others came to the table to sort of sit and say, well, let's talk about what would be the best plan. That's a possibility that was the approach that was being adopted, notwithstanding what I describe as the political slogan that was put forward as a political slogan during the campaign of uploading subways. That's a possibility that there isn't a plan, like a detailed plan of the kind that you want to see.
In terms of, has everything been planned out to the last detail or even partially, sort of like in design work. Are we at 30% design work or 70% design work? But I'd be very surprised if there's absolutely no plan. I mean, my understanding is that the provincial government is contemplating introducing legislation on this within the next 3 months. So I'd be very surprised if there is absolutely no plan. Or even a narrow range of ideas. I suppose it's possible, but I'd be extraordinarily surprised. Because again, to speak to the governance gaps, as I said earlier, the province said, well, we think we'd like to do this. Well, they said it a little more strongly than that. And City Council said, we'd rather not. And City Council, is a government with the authority to say that, and it's being disregarded. So it's being, or it not disregarded perhaps, it is being suggested that City Council hold that thought for a moment while we have a conversation. There has to be something, there has to be a reason behind that. This is not that speculative.
All right. I presume you're familiar with the terms of reference that Deputy Mayor Thompson asked you about, and would you accept for purposes of our discussion that in those terms of reference, agreed to by both sides as a framework for those very discussions you were talking about, there is a spectrum, if I can call it that, of outcomes that is specifically acknowledged, including one that says no upload, one that says a partial upload, and one that says a full upload, whatever all that means, because again, I don't think anybody's defined what an upload is, but you would accept the fact that an agreed upon terms of reference for those talks specifically has in it as one possible outcome that can be and will and is being discussed, no upload.
Yes, as I mentioned in my comments to Councillor Thompson, there is an open-ended quality to it, yes.
But it does include all ends of the spectrum, as it were.
It does.
And then the final question I'd like to ask you is, you made allusion to, and quite properly so, and you were questioned a little bit by Councillor Perks on this. I presume you've had a chance to take a look at the report written by the city manager, who will speak to that report later. And I'm looking at page 8, and we were talking about public consultation. And there you have listed at his hand a list that includes public meetings, teletown halls, webinars, third-party research, online surveys, pop-ups, and expert advisory panels. And I don't think the list was meant to be, all-inclusive, but that list is all there. And the public meetings part, I think, bears a very substantial resemblance to the kind of process you referred to in a complementary manner that we use for transit planning, which is public meetings, open house style meetings with presentations, information and updates, feedback, and attendees able to participate in discussion about that. You had a chance to take a look at that process that's suggested, because I think Councillor Perks put to you the possibility that all we were going to do is some public opinion research, but you'd acknowledge that that list, which is specifically put forward by the city manager, is a list that is much more complete than online surveys or than public opinion surveys, and does resemble some of what we do with other kinds of transit planning.
Yes, the two aspects that we're trying to point out are perhaps lacking there are, as compared to the transportation planning practices, public open meetings are preceded by stakeholder meetings, which are a different kind of focused discussion. They're very productive. I've participated in many of those, and that's a different kind of meeting than an open public meeting, particularly in terms of stakeholders, which include experts and people with a vested interest in the particular project, being able to bring specific experiential and expert information that they have on a specific project. And then the other part that's missing, through no fault of the city's, from that list, is all of that public consultation is on what? Until we have full information about what we're commenting on, that could be a lot of, well, not wasted time, but it's certainly limited.
So that goes back to our earlier question about whether there is some plan to present. But the final question is this, which is, you would think it would be a significant improvement then if we added to the city manager's list, and it's his list, not mine, but if we were to ask him later on when he talks with us to add a stakeholder meeting component to this, you would think that would be a significant improvement to this public consultation process, to put that in there.
Yes, I think that would be an improvement.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I think that's the end of questions for you, and we thank you very much for both your deputation and for your answers to the questions. And that would bring us then to John Cartwright from the Toronto and York Region Labour Council. Welcome. I think you know the rules, and you have 5 minutes, and then there may be some questions.
Thank you. I also want to thank you, Mayor, for acknowledging today's International Day for Elimination of Racial Discrimination. Our Labour Council and the Urban Alliance on Race Relations is hosting a major event in City Hall chambers tonight, which are particularly instructive due to what happened in New Zealand last week, a terrible tragedy. The Labour Council has had a long history of advocating around transit. I moved to Scarborough when I was 13, and I watched my stepmom stand at a bus stop at Kingston and Eglinton waiting for buses when the subway only went to Woodbine, to then take the bus and the subway and another bus to Cam H, where she worked as a nurse's aide. I watched her do that in frozen days and in warm days and in hot days. I watched her come home with bruises from dealing with patients, and always knew that people needed transit that would get them to work and home a whole lot better than we had at that point in time. I've been a transit advocate professionally, if you want to call it that, since I was first elected as a rep of the Carpenters Union in 1982. In the early 90s, I led the effort to try and get 4 subway lines built in Toronto, and that effort, where the city or Metro only had to come up with a small portion of the money, was frankly defeated by people like Scott Cavalier, Captain Zero, who said, no new taxes of any kind, we won't have that money. I watched the provincial government cancel those lines and fill in a $100 million hole in Eglinton. And myself and about 300 construction workers took black hard hats and marched to that location and threw an empty coffin into that place. So I know a lot about what we need to do to build transit. And it's not just about building transit, it's also about the operations of transit. Our labor movement has been in the forefront ever since the Harris Conservatives got rid of the operating subsidy to demand it be brought back in. We intervened in a number of provincial elections and went door to door saying we need to restore the operating subsidy in order for the TTC to once again be the award-winning transit agency in North America. So in front of us today, you have a manager's report that builds on City Council decision at the end of the year to affirm that the City of Toronto should maintain the control, operation, and ownership of our full assets of an integrated Toronto transit system. And I want to talk about how you negotiate when you're dealing with a government with a lot of power on the other side, and how you get power that puts you in a reasonable negotiating position. I have a little experience in negotiations. I've negotiated with multinational companies, with federal governments, with provincial governments, with city and school boards, with universities, with small mom-and-pop operations. And the things I've learned over 40 years of doing that is you need to have people engaged to give you the power to negotiate a fair deal. And what's missing from the manager's report is a concept of a major full-scale campaign to educate and engage residents to support and maintain city ownership. And yes, there's 3 options in front of us. And of course, we prefer the third option, and in fact, that this government step up to the table and restore the subsidy and talk about state of good repair and do a whole number of other good things. The City of Toronto will not achieve that goal without fully engaging the residents and citizens of this city. And that doesn't mean bringing them to a consultation meeting where they sit at small tables and they're asked to fill out a form and then they walk away. It talks about building a campaign in the fullest sense of the word. Now, some people say this government has a majority. You can't do anything. You've just got to go along and try and get the best out of it. But that's not what residents and city councils in the 905 did in the Greenbelt. They organized, they put pressure on politicians, they changed the outcome. That's not what people, a Francophone community did in Ontario. They organized, they put pressure, they changed the outcome. You could change the outcome if the city chooses to engage the power of our 2.5 or 2.6 million residents and citizens in this process in a real way. In 2003, when the new Liberal government was elected, they had promised new support for transit. And then the Premier went and said, oh my goodness, the cupboard is bare, we can't possibly come up with that money. The Labour movement partnered with the City of Toronto and TTC and did a mass public campaign. We had ads on bus shelters and transit vehicles saying, it's not rocket science, we need fair funding. And we were able to put enough pressure on that government to restore a significant piece of funding. Similarly, on the federal level, around the gas tax. Last thing I'll say is, if you're talking about expertise and expert panels, you have to have the transit union at that table. They are the real experts. They're the frontline experts of making this happen. The Labour movement is happy to partner with the City of Toronto, but you can't go into this discussion with one hand tied behind your back. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Cartwright. Questions, first starting with our visiting members. Councillor Carroll.
So the terms of reference that you're speaking to today include in them a clause about confidentiality. And you speak to your expertise in negotiations. You know there's a component that probably does have to be done confidentially because it has real estate business case values. But in engaging the public, we can go a lot further, can't we, than these terms of reference without jeopardizing anything that might be needed at the end of this negotiation. The campaign still needs more information for the public. Would you agree?
I think some of those elements of the very complexity of ownership, of land ownership, of how do you split the provision of electricity between the streetcars and the subway because it comes from the same place. Some of the elements of what would it require to raise money from developers, for instance, we're one of the planks of this government, we'll have developers pay for it. Well, the experts have said you'd need about 20 high-rise buildings at every subway to pay for any of them. The subway stop at Lawrence, right at Scarborough General Hospital, it's $480 million cost. I was around when Murray Frum was talking about a bunch of us developers will come together and we'll fund the Sheppard Subway. And when somebody said, okay, good, let me see the color of your money, it wasn't there. The big question we have, where will the money come from? And I've asked this of people who are Conservative Party, loyalists. And I'm saying, I've always advocated, I want to see subways, but I also want to see LRT in a proper mix. Where will you find the money? And given what they've said about the deficit, which we believe is inflated in their numbers, given what they've just said they're going to do about slashing hundreds of millions of dollars out of the education budget, and where are they going to find this money? If I believe that there was a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow that the Premier Ford and the Transportation Minister could find and bring to this solution, it would be a different kind of conversation. But I think there's deep skepticism about how transit planning will be politicized and distorted through this process. We've seen the record. That's been the record. And until they answer the question of where will the money come to put the state of good repair in place, to actually properly support operating, and to build real expansion into the suburbs, I think people have to be incredibly skeptical, and we need the public engaged and asking those tough questions.
Right. One other question, Mr. Mayor. Folks might be sitting here saying, oh, that's the president of the Labour Council. He's just here because he's worried that ATU won't continue to be the operators of this system. Is that the point here, or is there another point here about the ownership of the system?
Our Labour movement and myself personally are very strongly committed to respond to the climate crisis that faces our world. I was at COP21 in Paris when our country said we would be there to meet those. Public transit is a crucial part of dealing with the climate crisis. It's also about decent jobs, and if you look at the face of who's driving our buses and subways, it reflects the diversity of this city. And yes, it's about not tearing apart a system and finding ourselves with competing interests.
Okay. Right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Karygiannis.
Thank you, Mr. Cartwright, through the mayor. Good morning and welcome to the Executive Committee in City Hall. You talked about your mom at waiting for a subway. There was no subway where she wanted to go. Do we need more subways if the money is available and more subway stops?
Do we need, sorry?
Do we need more subways and subway stops if the money is available?
Somebody opened the door when you said the last sentence, sorry.
Do we need more subways and subway stops if the money was to become available?
Absolutely.
If there is third-party sources, like a 3P participation, public-private participation that wants to participate in this, should we examine that?
Well, that's the Metrolinx model. And, the reality about P3s is that somebody has to get a cut of between 8 to 14% profit in order to justify the consortiums that are put together for that. And there is no free money So if somebody says, I'll bring in a P3 and somehow that reduces the liability of the public, it's not true. You still have to pay back the debt plus the profit sector for any P3 model. So a P3 model does not provide you with free money. The question still comes back is, where will the money come from? And that's what the province has not indicated any indication. They're cutting taxes. They're slashing their own revenue streams. And unless they're going to suck billions of dollars out of education, healthcare, and social services, I don't know which financial genius can tell us where that money will come from.
I think you and I agree that that's not a good choice and it's something that we should not be endeavoring in or encouraging our provincial counterparts to participate in. Another question that I have for you, the Scarborough Subway.
Yep.
There was funding that was allocated provincially, federally, municipally. It's in the books. I became one-stop subway. There's other people advocating that should be more stops. Should we continue to build that subway? Should we continue engaging our other partners, the other two levels of government, in order to fulfill that promise and fulfill that subway?
Our Labour Council doesn't have a position on the Scarborough Subway. Okay. As somebody who grew up in Scarborough, there's no point taking a subway from Kennedy to the town centre and not stopping somewhere in between. Lawrence, the buses on Lawrence are huge, and if you're going to actually build transit in this city, you've got to do it so people are served properly.
How many jobs would be created that your members would benefit from if the Scarborough Subway were to be completed?
I don't know the numbers exactly, but the cost understanding is about $3 million. So on the Eglinton RT line, and we've negotiated a community benefits agreement with Metrolinx and RT, so I'm quite familiar with that. That cost is $5.4 million. And there, you know, we say one big number when we're trying to promote something and advocate for it. The reality is, on-site work, I think we're looking at about 4,000 person years worth of construction.
Okay.
And then there's more work on the professional admin and technical side. So my guess is the Scarborough Subway would be, you know, less than half of that because there's not nearly as many stations.
If we were to build more subways, we would be articulating more people working and more people being engaged.
Absolutely.
So my final question to you.
Whether it's subways or LRTs, it's not a subway-only conversation about how do we expand transit and provide it to all the people of all of the City of Toronto.
But you agree that a subway would articulate in more jobs for your members?
Yep.
My final.
Actually, it is. So could you try and bring it around to the report on the...
I will.
Pardon me? Yeah.
I will.
I mean, I allow quite a bit of latitude on that, but I think we've now had like 9 questions on, you know, transit expansion, not related in any way back to the report that's in front of us today, which is to do with the uploading process, as it were, the uploading discussion. Anyway, you said it was your final question, so finish that question and we'll move on.
Right, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I apologize for my colleagues not seeing it my way, but that's a different story. My final question, Mr. Cartwright, is...
Just keep going. Councillor Karygiannis, finish the question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My final question, Mr. Cartwright, is how many jobs would be created if we were to extend the subway along Sheppard, east and west, and how would this...
All right.
How would this...
I can't tell you.
Mr. Cartwright, you go ahead and answer that, and if as best you can, thank you, if you would. And that was, again, of questionable relevance to the report in front of us. But
Okay.
So, sir,
Pardon?
do you have any more to say on that? His question, his final question. How many jobs, I think he asked you about.
No, I can't say other than to say that the city is looking at community benefits as part of expansion. We've done that with Metrolinx. It's a crucial element of ensuring that the prosperity that comes from this construction is shared across all of our communities. And that's something that we hope, when we get to the end of this, is integrated into the city's plans for its transit expansion as well. All
right. Thank you very much, Councillor Karygiannis. I think I had Councillor Thompson. Was there any other visiting members that wanted to ask questions? If not, we'll move to Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Through to Mr. Cartwright, it's always good to have you here. You're always very clear. But you'll agree with me that we're in a bit of a conundrum at this particular point in time as part of this particular process. So my question to you is that you've talked about building the campaign, and I'm just wondering, what do we build it on? Is it build it on whether or not we focus on uploading, or a particular arrangement that would be of utility to the citizens of Toronto in terms of the relationship with respect to the province, a model that works for the city, and because you talk a little bit about the finance, the money piece is always the big question in terms of affordability. So I'm just wondering whether or not we would need to know what we would be sort of building this, if you will, campaign either for or against, because at this time I don't think we really know that, other than the question is, the province has indicated that they're interested in uploading the subway, but we don't know what that's all about, and that's what we need to figure out. So I'm just wondering, when would we devise a campaign as part of this mass campaign to address this issue?
Well, I think you start from your basic position of the City Council, which is to say we wish to maintain the ownership of the TTC as an entirely integrated system, owned, operated, controlled by the City of Toronto. That's our goal. We want the people of Toronto to know that there is a risk of the system being torn apart, that there are many unknowns in that potential outcome. The city believes that for a number of reasons, the TTC needs to have a different funding arrangement and adequate support from all levels of government, that we can't solve the problem of overcrowded buses, of people standing at subway platforms for 3 cars going by without a new arrangement to improve transit. But the notion of the integrity of this system, which is what City Council is on record of saying, we want to defend the integrity, have ownership within the city, ensure democratic accountability, which is what happens here at commission meetings, which frankly at the Metrolinx, while I have great respect for the staff there's a different process. The public can't go and make deputations like this. That's your advocacy. You don't have to call people names. You don't have to throw sticks. I put an op-ed in the Star, which I'll pass around, that was published yesterday in the Star website. I do call into question, given what's just happened in a number of things around Queen's Park, can we trust that the transit planning will not be distorted or politicized? The city doesn't have to say that. The city can say, here's our stated intention, to maintain the system and its integrity, fully owned, operated, and controlled by the City of Toronto. We want the people of Toronto to know what's at stake. We want the people of Toronto to get engaged and tell your member of provincial parliament what your concerns may be. When we did the Public Transit for the Public Good campaign in 2003-04, there was nothing there that cast aspersions at the province or its rationale for why it was saying there's a problem with fulfilling our promises. We simply ensured that every time somebody walked on a bus or a streetcar or a subway, they saw something that said, it's not rocket science. Good transit needs to be funded. Go to this website, find out more. Or send a message to your member of provincial parliament if you're concerned. It's that nature. But when you have town hall meetings, if they're done in a way that are disarming and disempowering of people, those don't build your negotiating strength. If you just sit at a table and have that conversation and walk out and nobody gets to speak and share with their fellow residents and citizens how we need to respond to this, you do not have negotiating power. And, Councillor, I have negotiated at times in what seemed to be impossible situations, where it was impossible for the group of employees, to achieve what they wanted, and we changed that terms. And by the way, I've also negotiated as an employer many, many times on the other side of a trade union, asking me for everything and the moon and the stars.
I just have one final question for you. Of the 3 options,
yep,
which of the 3 should we pursue or none?
Well, the third option talks about a new realignment and arrangement. And there's massive breadth within that assertion. So it's not inappropriate that that's one of the 3 options that are in the document. And I think if that wasn't in the document, people would be deeply troubled. But it is there as a statement of the best outcome the city may look for, which is not just the status quo, but in fact, new funding arrangements for the transit operation of this entire city, from border to border to border, and integrating with other transit properties outside of Toronto.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson, Deputy Mayor, and thanks, Mr. Cartwright. And Deputy Mayor Bylaw had a question for you.
Good morning, John. I just want to confirm I'm hearing this right. So What you're saying is, despite which definition at the end of the day upload is going to mean, because right now we have 3 scenarios in our terms of reference, that we should be really putting out there our goals and what we want out of this exercise. The funding, the no impact on our routes, no impact on our workers, we need to have these and engage the city on these end goals that we want, despite which the scenario is going to be. I mean, we don't need enough definition of upload to have this public campaign and to engage Torontonians in this conversation. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. When, any negotiations, the one side comes in with its goals, and the other side comes in with goals, and you end up somewhere. And where you end up is about the power that each side has in determining the outcome.
And you're saying that our biggest power is the residents of Toronto.
And the biggest power has always been informed, active, engaged citizenry. And when I say citizens, I don't mean just Canadian citizens. I mean those of us who have come from 194 countries in this world trying to make this a better place. And it does talk about using other languages, but informed and engaged residents is the key to democracy and is also the key to having the right outcome. Because none of us individually have all the answers. This is tough and tricky terrain. We need to be informed by the expertise, including the experts who make this thing run, move 1.5 million people a day, experts in academia and planning in other areas, and ordinary citizens and ordinary residents. The mom that's taking the 2 kids on the bus to drop them off at childcare. Her voice needs to be heard as well.
And so you'd probably believe and advise us to make sure that this public campaign also is very in tune with the consultations, that actually feeds into the consultations that we're going to have to motivate people to attend, to participate, so that we have good outcomes, good participation, that we engage the city in these consultations. That shouldn't just be a little paper. That should be, we need to galvanize Torontonians to be heard on this issue.
Absolutely. There's a multifaceted element to the dynamics here. And so, an education element is one piece of it, and engagement, authentic engagement, including in every neighborhood and geography, and language community is a piece of it. And how the wisdom of people is then brought into the negotiations can make a dramatic difference. There is no real way of being powerful in these difficult situations without having, and we've seen the results already in the Greenbelt, in Francophone. We're seeing it now around parents of autistic families. When people are saying, I have deep concerns, most people have to move somewhere and come up with a better answer.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bylaw. Are there any other members of the committee wishing to ask questions of Mr. Cartwright? Well, we'll then thank you very much for your deputation and for your answers. And we will go next to Carlos Santos, Amalgamated Transit Union, Local 113. Good morning. You're most welcome here, and as you know, you have 5 minutes to make your deputation, or less, as you wish, and then there may be some questions.
Good morning,
yep.
Mr. Mayor.
You're on, loud and clear. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the Executive Committee this morning. My name is Carlos Santos, and I represent over 11,500 members through the Amalgamated Transit Union, Local 113. These workers are the lifeblood of Toronto. We move Toronto every day, and we keep our city moving. The report before you lays out a path to transfer the TTC subway to the province. I want to be absolutely clear, Local 113 is against this sell-off of our subway. This is a major issue for our members, but also the public. I want to put on the record and share the feelings of so many TTC users that this is a bad idea and will not end well. ATU 113 is encouraged by Council's support for keeping ownership of the TTC in the City of Toronto, and we support your demand that the City be completely involved and be fully consulted on the future of the system. However, this seems to be a pipe dream. Look around. The Ford government is tearing apart our healthcare and education systems. Teachers and nurses are scared for their jobs. Why would we trust the government to handle our subway and the TTC when we just have to look at the chaos being created in other public services? To Mayor John Tory, please put it on the record. Can you trust the Premier after all of this? I think we can establish that we can't trust the Ford government to fully consult and involve the city on the upload. Therefore, it is crucial that the city plan its own robust consultation to protect our subway. Our riders, our workers, and our city are counting on it. Unfortunately, that is not what we see in this document. The upload is far too profound a change in the way that this city works to leave consultation to online surveys and open house style town halls. If you wanted feedback on a new bike lane or the placement of a park, then having people call in or leave comments on cards might be enough. But this is a very complex issue. This is not just a bike lane on Bloor or a green space being proposed. This is the lifeblood of our city. So why are we dropping the ball and letting the process run off the tracks? What is needed is deep, varied consultation that gives the residents across the city real opportunities to hear from the experts, learn from the contributions of others in the room, and make their views heard. The city has an opportunity to both stand up to the Ford government that is causing so much damage in our city, in our province. The city has access to a wealth of resources, including 11,500 ATU 113 members who literally do the heavy lifting in moving our city. I want to make a clear recommendation. I want the executive today to appoint a representative from ATU 113 to the Expert Advisory Committee to ensure that the workers who know our system best have a seat at the table. Far too often, governments make decisions that will affect our frontline workers without actually talking to those workers. Finally, I hope the executive will seriously look at and take a chance to review in options 1 and 2 of the province's plan involve transfer of subway maintenance to the province. Based on the P3 model used by Metrolinx and elsewhere, this will result in the privatization of maintenance and the loss of 2,500 to 3,000 family and community supporting jobs in the GTA. These are good jobs in our community. They keep families employed and living in Toronto and the GTA. They ensure that children have food on the table and a roof over their heads. These workers are citizens, they are taxpayers, and they are voters, and they will not forget how you act today. Our communities will remember this. Any loss would be a dramatic blow to our communities that we all share. Think about the areas you represent and the impact this change will have. Please think about the future of our city and how we can work together to make sure we keep TTC on track. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Santos. Councillor Carroll.
Thank you. A similar question to the question I posed of Mr. Cartwright. Sure. People could say, "Oh, you're just here to make sure your members still have jobs." If this, but you say it's a bad idea. What if at the table the province says, "Oh, we're going to use ATU members"? Is it still a bad idea?
So, the City of Toronto is obligated to the taxpayers of Toronto to operate and maintain the TTC.
Right. So
why would we want the province to operate it? Then if let's just say Metrolinx takes it over, then there's no accountability, there's no deputations, there's no consultation.
So they could become your new boss. We still have a less accountable system.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is not just about the workers. This is also about the citizens of Toronto. This is about public transit.
Right.
Thank you.
So in your deputation, you say that you suggest that the city hold a broader consultation if we can't count on the province to do it. The criticism might come, "Oh, we're just putting on a show. We're just providing a show, and only people who say no will be there." If we have a consultation and people come to speak to all three options, not just the public option, is that still a worthwhile exercise? Does that still make this a more accountable decision-making process?
Of course it does. It's a consultation, and that's the whole purpose of it, to find out what the citizens of Toronto want.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Thanks, Councillor Carroll. Members of the committee wishing to ask questions of Mr. Santos? Councillor Thompson? No? Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much then, sir. Appreciate your time here today.
Thank you for having me.
Next, we have John Sewell. Again, you're most welcome, Mr. Sewell. You know the rules. 5 minutes, and then there may be some questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I actually have two deputations, one on item number 1 and the other on item number 12. So I might go a bit over the 5 minutes if I can.
Well, we will give you the former mayor's special bonus, but it will be only limited.
Well,
I know you're trying to, but we're hearing the items together, so it means theoretically one 5-minute deputation, but we'll just, because you're a former mayor, there'll be a bit of latitude, but to try and deal with it.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. The first deputation was on behalf of Defend Toronto, which is an organization that has been formed to try and deal with questions that the government has been raising, the provincial government has been raising. And I wanted to indicate there are a number of members of Defend Toronto here today, and maybe they could stand or put up their hands, and you get a sense that there's people. We've got people. And first, to relate to the question of the quarterly report. This first quarterly report is very cryptic. It does not provide any detail of what discussions have taken place or the schedules of the decision-making and what it will be. It recommends spending $2 million, apart from indicating that a lawyer will be retained. It says nothing about what the funds will be spent on. It proposes that the city should reimburse the city for this sum. The province should reimburse the city for this sum. Although it gives no indication why the province would reimburse the city to help the city oppose the province in taking ownership of the subway. The council decision in December, and in fact earlier in May, was overwhelming in telling the province that the city is opposed to the province assuming ownership of the subway. In simple language, no means no. Council did not authorize negotiations with the province about ownership. The terms of reference have never been presented to City Council for approval, and if the terms of reference are interpreted to authorize these negotiations about the ownership of the subway, then clearly they are contrary to the Council decision. We believe that the Executive Committee must adhere to Council decisions, and accordingly, it should instruct the city manager to refuse to discuss the possibility of the provincial government taking ownership of the subway. Talking about the other two options, that's perfectly fine. But the question of ownership, Council has said no to that, and there should not be any discussions about that, in our opinion. Regarding the question of the publicity campaign, I'm speaking here not only on my behalf, but on behalf of the former Mayor, Barbara Hall. She and I have consulted about this, and she asked that her name be added to my deputation. And we fear that the terms of reference do little to protect the city's interests. And while that document proposes the 3 options for the upload that have been mentioned, the province is very clear about the fact that it is interested only in the first option. In the February 20th letter to me, the Minister of Transport, Jeff Urich, refers to the terms of reference and then states, quote, "The government's position remains unchanged. An upload of subway infrastructure to the province will get transit built faster and fulfill a commitment to the building and maintenance of new and existing subway lines." So the province has been pretty clear about what it wants to do, at least in the letter to me. Given the ability of the province to enact legislation to obtain what it wants in spite of objections from Council, witness a reduction in size, we are in an unenviable situation. And as former mayors, Barbara Hall and I are aware of the importance of public discussion in critical issues facing the city to ensure that residents are aware of the choices and their implications. This is particularly true in cases such as the subway upload, where many interested in transit may not think the change in ownership could make much difference for our integrated transit system. Yet it is clear when most members of the legislature do not represent Toronto, they will have little interest in ensuring that the subway is well funded so it meets the needs of those using it in Toronto. The example of New York City is instructive. The state has controlled the city's transit system for some decades and has not only refused to inject funds needed to make it run well, it has actually scooped money out of the transit system, devoted that money to other state priorities. We also believe that public discussion will help ensure that the laws regarding the compulsory taking of property in Ontario, the Expropriation Act as an example, will be brought into play to protect the city's subway assets. The Expropriation Act requires the province to hold a hearing to determine if the taking is fair, sound, and reasonably necessary, and then requires that market value be paid. And if we adhered to the Expropriation Act, where they want to take something that we don't want to give away, they'd first have to have that hearing. And we think it would be very, very helpful to find out whether or not what the province wants to do is fair, sound, and reasonably necessary, as required by the law of Ontario today. We would note that today is the first occasion when members of the public have had an opportunity to address decision makers on this issue, even though the council decision to oppose the upload was made more than 3 months ago. Public discussion, as John Cartwright has mentioned, will strengthen council's hand in this very important matter. It's really, really needed. And for these reasons, we urge you to support a public information campaign. Thank you very much.
Well done. I was going to allow the special former mayor's bonus to extend to 7 minutes, and you finished at 6:30, so thank you very much for that. All right, Councillor Carroll, you had some questions.
So now you're going to have to allow Councillor Nunziata 2 extra minutes every time she speaks.
I was actually thinking of myself in 20 years, but having said all that, Councillor Carroll, go ahead.
20 years. I wish it was only 20 years.
Yeah.
So I'll ask you a similar question. You want a public information campaign, but one of my colleagues, Councillor Ford, wrote an op-ed last night saying, you know, naysayers just want to say no, and there's no room for a cooperative discussion about how to have the best transit system in the City of Toronto. Is that the conversation Defend Toronto wants to have?
Oh, I want to have a conversation about the best transit system. No question about that. Yep.
That's my only question. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Carroll. Other visiting members of the council that want to ask questions? All right, we can move to the committee then. Questions of Mr. Sewell? Going once, going twice. Mr. Sewell, thanks very much. Right, then we come to Moshe Herdsman. Moshe Herdsman, oh, okay, there we are. Good morning. And I think you've seen how we are working here. We have 5 minutes. Unfortunately, you're not a former mayor, so you don't get the bonus, but you have the 5 minutes, and then there may be some questions. Thank you for coming.
All right. Thank you, Mayor and committee, for having me. My name is Moshe Herdsman. I am a lifelong transit user. As a child, I would commute for 90 minutes from Weston and Lawrence to Scarborough by bus. And as an adult, I saved up enough money to live on campus and began working downtown. It was a short walk to school and a 90-minute trip to work at King and University. The integrated bus system was vital to my commute. The slightest delay would result in me being late and putting me at risk with my employer. Now, as a teenager, I was living in Brampton and I faced similar commute challenges. I had my first brush with Metrolinx when I started university. Initially, I was taking the GO bus to York, and that was a 45-minute trip to campus. Then fares began to increase, and my only option was to take the Brampton Transit. That doubled my travel time, and that commute left me drained financially as well as mentally. So I've lived in many places where Metrolinx had been active, and I've witnessed how their brand of transit modernization results in worse service for more money. I know that Doug Ford has no intention to make the City of Toronto's transit system better. A subway fragmented from its bus system does not benefit transit riders anywhere. What I want is more people to understand what it will look like if the province takes transit away from the city, and that's why I'm asking you to support a public information campaign and to strengthen your stance to oppose the upload. Thank you.
Very succinct deputation. We'll just see if there are some questions. I might just have one for you. Did you have one there, Councillor Carroll? Please, go ahead.
So you're the youngest deputant that has spoken yet, but as a daily rider, you're also pretty clear that we will lose that sense of integration if we start to look at other models. that guiding principle that it has to continue to flow and be fully integrated, it really isn't in plain language in the report that we're looking at here. We're looking at governance models, funding models, et cetera. But the fact that the user will feel integration and flow to the system here and forever after isn't really in the language. If we did have that public consultation system, would that be what we'd hear from daily transit-reliant commuters?
Yeah, I believe so. I think you'd hear like people just worried that even though it's maybe baked into the model, when you have, like someone referenced before, kind of like tugging two different bodies operating the subway and the bus system, there is that fear that things won't line up as we hope.
One of the deputants said that the public ought to at least be able to read the report by Michael Lindsay, the advisor who wrote a report for the province. He's an expert in P3 financing, but we've heard of systems that when they did this joint ownership, dual ownership, Sydney, Australia, and New York City, that exactly what you're worried about is exactly what happens. The integration breaks down between the different modes of transportation. If that report was made available to the public, would you want to read that report just to look in there to see if he even looked at those other cities before advising the province?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Carroll. Any other questions for Mr. Hertzman? Well, thank you very much for being here today and for your deputation and your answers. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Hamish Wilson is next. You know the drill, Mr. Wilson?
Yes, I do, and thank you very much for being here. I fear that there's going to be nothing good coming out of this this proposal for taking the subway from us. Forwards is backwards. I think we know that. And I don't think they can be trusted to do anything good for the citizens of Toronto, the taxpayers of Toronto, the transit users of Toronto, and the environment. I fear that if it does get taken, we'll see even more subways to sprawl that are a blight on the economics of our existing transit. The Sheppard subway is still needing a subsidy per ride. The extension past York University is also bleeding the system. We do not need the subways further into sprawl as opposed to relief subway or function, which is, I think we're in such a crisis, we have to have relief function, not merely a subway or a stubway. So it's a shift in shaft, and I don't think we're going to do well. So please strongly resist all of this. And start with changing the language. Instead of using their terms of upload, even uptake is better. I think it's taking, I think it's theft, it could be part of a smash and grab, and why not consider using the term expropriation? Because again, it's a taking. We've said no, and by using the term expropriation, I think we have to also figure in that yes, it is part of a taking without consent, and that should involve the Expropriations Act, I think, because that's another route to get it tied up in courts by saying no, it's expropriation. Why does the Expropriation Act not apply? Another thing that I think we should be doing is asking the federal level for disallowance of any bill. Yes, we're in a perilous position, even though Toronto has predated the formation of Ontario, but the federal level does have the power of disallowance of bills. And you can't just do it because, oh, we don't like it. But there are three reasons, I think, for suggesting this path. One is on an equity ground, in that women use transit a bit more than men, and they need it more. And that's one issue, as well as defending the taxpayers of Toronto. And I think it would be useful to get a full, you folks would know the numbers and do the math, get a list of how much the federal level has actually contributed to the transit system over the decades. It's the federal taxpayer that also deserves respect. Can we actually get that listing up? And that's one way of that list up, and that's one way of actually bringing the federal level in, because I'm sure they put in like $1 billion or $2 or $3 or $4 at this point. They might have an interest in respecting the taxpayer. Another reason for asking the federal level in to disallow is that we absolutely need a good functioning integrated public transit system to be operating. We have such a mess of our mobility right now. To have more price hikes, as I'm sure the privatization will probably bring in, and the chaos, this is not good for our economy. We need effective mobility, and there are ways of doing it beyond what Mr. Ford wants to do. Another reason is the climate issue, the climate breakdown. Transport leads our greenhouse gas emissions. We absolutely have to really ratchet down our emissions. I think if you start putting a climate lens on what's going on or what might go on, and we have to do this for everything. Everything. We're at 411 parts CO2. That's a horrible, horrible situation. So again, change the language, use at least uptake, if not taking, if not theft, if not expropriation, and why not explore using the Expropriations Act? And hey, offer up the gardener instead of the subway, please. Take the gardener instead. You want to steal something, take the gardener. Do put the climate lens on. Ask the federal level for disallowance, calculate the federal level dollars in, and perhaps get the ATU at the table. Thank you.
There are questions of Mr. Wilson? Okay, hearing none, well, thank you very much for being here. Miguel Avila de Velarde. Good morning.
Thank you, John. Good morning.
Nice to see you. 5 minutes. Over to you.
Well, I'm here speaking on item EX 3.1 and EX 3.12 together. Reluctantly, I want to say that I accept the upload, but the conditions that people already have spoken. In the last 10 years, we just built a few kilometers of subway under your administration, Mr. Mayor. We are allowed to have kids riding our TTC for free until the age of 12 years old. We thank you for the discount Presto card, which I am a user of that one because I had to pick up my kids on Saturdays when I'm allowed to see my children. So coming from Toronto to Scarborough is like an hour and a half time length. I hope that this upload will certainly achieve what we have been able to do in the last 10 years, which is to have a subway to Scarborough, to the end of the Scarborough. Today we are debating the Lumina experience for the Toronto Zoo. Imagine if the Toronto Zoo would have listened to us. We should have advocated for the subway station right to the gates of the Toronto Zoo, and we will have to beg for $5 million for the Lumina waste of taxpayers' money. What else? Doug Ford has a gun to our foreheads. It's called the notwithstanding clause. Seriously, there is no way we can fight this in court. He will always win. So, again, just repeating what other people have speak about it, is to engage with the province, ensuring that we have the best deal possible. I also want to support the report from the city manager that we had to ensure that the province honor the $2 million we're going to spend, and a fancy lawyer that we're going to pay him $134,000 to help us draft the documents for the upload conversations. Well, that's all I had to say, and I hope we get the best deal possible for Toronto residents. As a bike activist, I ride the TTC, I ride the bicycles every day, so I ensure that Vision Zero 2.0 will address that concern that I have, that you will ensure that all bicycle riders like myself are protected from cars and accidents, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Avila Velarde. Any questions? Okay, thanks again. Mathura Karanathy. Mathura Karanathy, if I mispronounced the name, I apologize. There we are. Good morning.
Morning.
You're welcome here, and you have 5 minutes to make your deputation.
Great. My name is Madhura Karnanathi. I'm a senior research analyst at the Council of Agencies Serving South Asians, also known as CASA. As someone who works, volunteers, and lives in Scarborough, I see public transport as a great need in my community. It is therefore paramount that robust and meaningful public consultations take place. We should know the province's plan. We should know the impacts of the plan on Scarborough residents. We should know how racialized communities will be impacted, and we should be consulted. We should also ensure that community voices are part of the expert advisory panel. The province's plan to take ownership of the TTC subways will create significant and lasting changes to transit governance in Toronto. But there has been little transparency about what the province's intentions are and what the impacts will be. This lack of communication, consultation, and consent is highly troubling, as there is a lack of how this plan will impact folks who are in Scarborough, especially, again, those who are racialized, who rely on public transport, and folks who have many barriers when it comes to employment, housing, mobility, and access. We need to ask, what are the impacts of a policy? What will be the impacts of a policy on most of the marginalized people in our city? What will the impacts of the policy be on racialized people in our city? CASA is particularly concerned with the impacts of policies on South Asian communities, access to employment, social determinants of health. Affordable, safe, and reliable transit is needed to access employment opportunities, healthcare, food, and community connection. Although little is certain about the province's plan based on the information that is available, we have three serious concerns about the impacts on Scarborough residents and the communities we serve: delays to rapid transit, affordability, and accountability. First, experts have warned the province's building model will delay new lines. Rapid transit is desperately needed in Scarborough and to provide access to opportunities. Affordability is another concern. The provincial transit agency has been considering fare integration options, including fare by speed and fare by distance. This would especially impact lower income suburban residents who are charged more to travel downtown or to access subways. The options on the negotiation table do not clearly state that fare policy will continue to be decided by the TTC and the City of Toronto. My third concern is accountability. It is difficult to take time to attend a committee meeting or a TTC board meeting, but it is impossible to attend and speak at a Metrolinx meeting. Our transit system needs to be accountable to us and to be open to input from the communities it serves. A lack of consultation on decisions that will directly impact Scarborough and racialized folks who rely on the public resource is the height of disrespect for our communities and racism that is entrenched in policy-making decisions. For these reasons, the public needs to be given a meaningful opportunity to both understand and give input into this plan. Consultation must be robust and must include diverse communities. We urge you to make this process transparent by launching meaningful public consultations and a public information campaign in multiple languages to ensure that residents truly understand the potential impacts of this proposed change. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Are there questions? Councillor Carroll.
Yes, so your number one concern in your deputation, the rapid transit concern, particularly in Scarborough, on that we already have consulted. We have E-aid, we have planned, we have a subway line, we have smart track stations. Is it your view that on those we don't need to consult? We're already building them. If the province wants to build them and take all the credit, we could just say, here's the work so far, proceed.
Is this for the LRT?
Well, no, for the lines that council currently has approved of and is building are a couple smart track stations and the Scarborough Subway that will go to Scarborough Town Centre. If they just want to see transit built and they don't want to slow it down, they want to speed it up, they could just write a check and do that right now. Would that make residents happy, or is it that they want to have a little more creativity?
I think there is more consultation and there's more need for that as well. I'm also wondering in terms of conversation around the LRT versus Sheppard Subway. I think that's a conversation that hasn't been happening in a lot of racialized communities. And I know in terms of conversations I've had in our communities as well, there seems to be a lack of communication about facts about what will happen. And again, what has been talked about is funding as well. As a Scarborough resident, as someone who works in this field, and especially in terms of employment, I'm wondering what exactly that would come down in terms of money and where will the brunt be. And especially, I'm wondering if it'll come to our communities as well. So I definitely think there's room for consultations and communications. And again, with the province's plan, as this continues on, I think there absolutely needs to be more consultation.
So they still want to have that conversation about the various modes provide more or fewer stations. We could build that into the consultation. but you think they still want to have that conversation, particularly, disproportionate in the ridership are racialized communities. Do they feel like they haven't been consulted enough?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there absolutely needs to be more consultations, and there has to be an integrated approach. So oftentimes in conversations, it's not just access to the actual transit, but it's regarding employment. How do you actually work around your life, knowing that transit is one of the key factors? So having consultations with folks that are probably not at the table oftentimes, especially racialized folks who can't be there,
right.
And seeing it as a 360 holistic model.
Right, right. Okay, thank you so much. Yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Carroll. Other questions from members of council or members of the committee? Hearing none, I'll thank you very much for the deputation. We continue to move along then to the list of, because the next speaker is not any longer speaking. The next speaker on under item EX 3.12, since we're hearing them together, is Alan Kaspersky. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome, and you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, councillors. Recently, sometimes you read a book, you listen to someone speak about a topic, and you realize that what they've written, what they've said, is as good as you could ever think about or relate on your own. That happened to me recently, and I'd like to tell you about that a little bit. The other week, I was at Ben McNally Books, just down the street. I'm sure most of you probably know it. If you don't, I highly recommend it. I went to a book launch organized by Peter McLeod, the CEO of Mass LBP. And the book was written by David Moscrop. It's called Too Dumb for Democracy: Why We Make Bad Political Decisions and How We Can Make Better Ones. And I'd like to speak to some of the things that David talked about that night. There were about 100 people or so there, and it was almost like he was speaking me directly, and I think it's appropriate to 3.12. According to David, he asked the question, are we too dumb for democracy? His answer was, his short answer was, no, we're not. Not really. However, we're often made to feel as if we are. We're often stuck in situations that encourage or lead us to make dumb, or what Moscrop refers to as bad political decisions. It's not that we lack the capacity to make good decisions, but rather we do not have the incentives, skills, resources, or opportunities to do so. And so we keep making bad political decisions, and they keep catching up with us. So what's a bad political decision? A bad political decision is one driven by bias, poor or incorrect information, or hidden motives. It's a decision often made on instinct without research or reflection, the sort of decision we are likely to rationalize in the face of challenge. It's something we're all prone to do. But a bad political decision is not something that we make or that I disagree with. Councillor Carroll makes a decision, I disagree with it, must be a bad decision. Doesn't necessarily follow. Bad political decisions, I'd be happy to talk to you about the 1984 Liberal Convention, the election that year when I worked in the PMO. There was a ton of bad decisions made that year, but I digress. Moscrop's idea of a good political decision, however, does not require any specific outcome. He does not presuppose that any opinion, policy, law, or electoral outcome is a good one simply because he agrees with it. Councillor Thompson makes a decision, I agree with it, must be a good decision. That doesn't necessarily follow. What Moscrop mostly cares about is process. Why? Because he writes, the process of reaching a good decision is independent of political parties, affiliations, beliefs, or staunchly held opinions. It does not matter if you're a conservative, liberal, or a Democrat. What matters is how you come to your conclusions and your policies. And since democracy requires repeated political decisions over time, achieving and maintaining good processes, regardless of where you are on the political spectrum, sets us up for success in the long run. Now, it may be the case, as he continued, that bad political processes, bad decision-making process leads to bad outcomes. Climate change is a result of bad political decisions, substantively and procedurally. This is why he thinks that if you fix the end outcome, you get the if you fix the outcomes we get, requires that we fix the process that we use to make decisions. So, how often do you, disagree with a political decision made by someone else? All the time. But we are more likely to accept that decision if we think that it's a product of a process that we support as fair and legitimate. So yes, getting to better decisions about what we ought to do requires that whatever else we do, we adopt a better process for decision making. So finally, in contrast to shifting goals of bad political decisions, a good political decision is rational. It's coherent, it's consistent, and it's informed. A good political decision is also autonomous. You have to be able to explain it to yourself and to someone else. We make good political decisions when we have enough good information to work with, the time and resources to sort through it, and the skills to work through that, what we want, and why we want it. A good political decision also includes the ability to explain our reasoning. It's not enough to just say, just because. At least not if we want to meet the standards of a democracy in which we treat each other respectfully. So in short, a good political decision belongs to us. Item 3.12 speaks to that. It speaks to the idea, and Mr. Mayor, you talked about the city manager's list of public consultation. I think there was one thing that was missing: citizen assemblies. There are people in this city.
I'll have to ask you to come to a conclusion,
absolutely,
just so you know.
Well, fair enough, I should have looked. If we're going to make a good political decision, it needs to include all of us. And I would like to be part of that in whatever way I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kaspersky. Councillor Carroll with a question.
So you think that right now there hasn't been near enough focus on the process. If we do hold the type of consultation that's asked for in item number 12, there has to be a piece of it that we discuss the process and whether or not the public thinks we've set up a good process. That would be a one-sided conversation because the province is not likely to have that conversation with the public. Under any party in government, they don't generally. Is it still a worthwhile conversation to have in the local community?
I think it is, because if the process is seen to be fair, open, informed, you will get people to participate in it. Queen's Park, our politicians, like you are, like a lot of people, they will listen, we would hope, to what people would say to them. If you want people to participate in a process, if you want them to trust the decisions you make are good ones, you need to go beyond public town halls. Town halls are interesting and we get lots of information, but do I feel I have a say or some influence in the decision that's made? I don't. I hope that I influence what you think, what the people around the table think, but I never know that. I think if you want a good process, a good outcome, to include all of us, I think that can reflect up to Queen's Park. We haven't seen a lot of evidence of listening, but it's early in their mandate. I think they will listen. They have to. There's 25 MPPs that will listen, provided that we have a good process to enable us to do that kind of thing to them or for them.
And if we hold a consultation, if we build the process that you describe in your deputation, would we be then offering them a better conversation than they're having right now with, for instance, autism parents?
It should be. I mean, I look at Ireland. Ireland was wrestling with abortion. Do they allow it? Do they not allow it? Catholic country and all those kind of things. What did they do? They got 99 people together, representative of the country, and they listened to expert panels. They listened to deputations. They had meetings after meeting after meeting, and they made a series of recommendations to the Irish Parliament and the vote on whether abortion should be legalized or not. I think you would do the same thing here in Toronto. If you had 99 people representative of the whole city that made recommendations to you, to Queen's Park, about what should happen with an upload, if there's an upload, no upload, whatever it happens to be, the relationship that should happen between the city and the province, I think that would help. I really do. There's got to be an opportunity. People in the autism community feel that nobody's listening to them, and so they're frustrated as heck. And that applies to all kinds of different issues. I think that's why you need to get the process done better. My humble opinion.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Carroll. Any other questions of Mr. Kaspersky? No, well, thank you very much for your very thoughtful deputation and for your answers to questions. And we go next to Dina LeBeau, CARP Toronto. I hadn't seen Ms. LeBeau. Is she here, Ms. LeBeau?
I'm here. I'm here.
Oh, there you are, already there.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Fine. You're most welcome, and you know how we work. You've got 5 minutes to make your deputation.
So I am a proud senior. I'm an ambassador for CARP Toronto, and I'm a member of the Toronto Seniors Forum here at City Hall, and I use transit system daily. Mr. Mayor, thank you for asking the city manager to create a robust public consultation and public information initiatives around this uploading issue, and also a thank you to Councillor Cressy and Matt Lowe for the propositions. All of us need to know what's going on here. The uploading or not of the TTC impacts the future of our children, our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren. They are counting on us to do right by them. This means that people want the process transparent, with meaningful public consultations so that the residents understand the pros and cons, benefits, risks, and our options. Uploading or not the TTC is of great concern to all seniors and to all Torontonians, because many of us use the system to get back and forth from work, to keep engaged in activities at senior centers, or go to school, libraries, universities, for medical appointments, social engagements, and just getting together with friends and family all over the city. These are the social determinants of health. Modest investments in transit over 20 years have left our system overcrowded to the breaking point and dangerous during peak periods, and it's also losing riders. We know that City Council is also currently working with the province and other regional governments on a growth plan for the greater Golden Horseshoe. So we realize the need for regional systems that plug into one another, seamlessly moving people around the region and back and forth. We know that this transit plan will take all 3 levels of government, the city, the region, and the province, constructively working together to make it a reality. But this city is our city, and we need to be part of the visioning of our future, so we need to be part of that discussion. Toronto is a hub of this greater Golden Horseshoe, at the center of the expansion, and it must be strong to hold and tie the regions together and still serve the people who are entering the city to play and work. When New York City's rapid transit was uploaded to another level of government, money started disappearing from New York as regional priorities, and the discussion of expenditures went there instead. Please do not let that happen here. Our underfunded city transit system is already using Band-Aids to hold itself together. The province focusing on new regional priorities before fixing what we need here in the city needs real thought. What happens to our priorities, like our relief line, the Eglinton East LRT, and the waterfront? Our subway system is also highly integrated and connects buses and streetcars and stations. If the province owns the subway system, what happens if the elevator goes down? Will there be even more delays because TTC has to call up a company to do maintenance and nobody can do it in-house? And it affects more than the TTC. Take the air rights discussion, developing apartments over at TTC stations. Does this also include new social and affordable housing quotas? So will you be negotiating for inclusionary zoning at 20% for people who need deeply affordable rents? This is complex. The city is evolving, and this is a process, and we would like to be kept in the communications loop throughout these discussions, through whatever communications projects the councillors and city manager's office put together to get the real facts and information out to us and leave time for us to get information back to you. As the discussions with the province unfold, hopefully for a better future for us all, we do not want to be left holding the short end of this stick. Just to end, the Toronto Seniors Forum did a mystery shopper evaluation of the TTC stations bus routes and streetcars last year and came up with 3 major issues critical to increased senior usage. Affordability. Basically, it's very expensive for low-income seniors to use the underfunded system as it is. The new numbers out of City Hall are showing 50% of Toronto seniors are living between $25,000 and $27,000 per year. Some have to skip meals to buy, or not buy their medicine, or not go to their doctor. Will uploading our TTC make it more affordable for these people? The prices just went up again, exacerbating the existing problem. Overcrowding. There is a massive overcrowding at certain times during the day, both in the vehicles and inside the stations and on the platforms, leading to safety and security problems, especially if one is physically challenged. In addition, it is similar at the buses and shelters and the wait times. Is loading, uploading the TTC going to fix that, or is that going to exacerbate that as well? And the last one is accessibility. We know there's a schedule, but 40% of the TTC stations still have to update and retrofit. And signage inside and outside is a huge problem. Is the uploading to the TTC going to help with accessibility?
And I'll ask you on that note to perhaps wrap up.
Okay, the province was supposed to be 100% by 2025, and we're not even close to meeting the target. Please ensure that your negotiations include solutions to those 3 items.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Carroll has a question for you.
Thank you. Yeah, you speak to some of the sort of detailed things that are, it sounds like what you're talking about is in an ongoing way. A seniors organization like yours would have to continue to advocate for things, you know, a change in signage or whatever. One of the experiences that groups talk about in the research I've done on Sydney is that that's one of the things that's most difficult. When it comes to the subway, which is now entirely New South Wales, council can really only talk about the parking spaces around it, and that's about it. And then they just operate the system on a threadbare budget of fare box and whatever New South Wales provides. But they don't have any control over design and signage and things like that. Your organization is speaking to that probably because you've advocated for a long time to all governments. Do you have good luck when you have to advocate to the provincial government, the federal government, on the types of detailed things you come here about?
So this is about listening to lived experience. When we hold these public consultations, you ask people what they think, you're going to get those 3 issues coming up over and over again. Those are the solutions to a fluid transit system that gets people moving throughout Toronto and the GTA and even further into the regions as it expands. Those are the issues that touch and face the people using the system.
But when you come to talk to us, things like this, budget committee, et cetera, do you have a little better luck than in a Queen's Park standing committee?
Well, it's been underfunded for 20 years, so no, not really, but the answer is to listen to the people. We're behind you. I mean, seriously, it's like John Cartwright said, like, there are hundreds of thousands of us behind you in this negotiation because these are our needs. These are our needs, our daily needs, our everyday needs. I don't want to take my life in my hand when I try and get on a subway at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the afternoon.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thanks, Councillor Carroll. Any other questions of Ms. LeBeau? Okay, if I see none, then I'll thank you very much for your deputation, and we'll move to Patience Evbagar. Good morning. Thank you for being here. You have 5 minutes.
Good morning. I'm just here to say, first and foremost, realistically speaking, the province can kind of do what it wants, and it proved that when it downsized the downsized Toronto City Council. we know the government we're dealing with. But like a lady just mentioned, the people are behind you. So when it comes to this negotiation, I really hope that you're not just listening to the complaints, but the fact that there's just support. And, you know, just like how you represent us, we have something that we want you to represent. If the takeover goes ahead, the subway, I believe, would be transferred to the province's transportation agency. And let's keep in mind that the citizens can depute speaking to their councillor about every aspect of transit services. Mayor Tory, I know you stated the real decision time will come once those discussions have happened, and whether or not they produce some kind of deal for change from the status quo that is good for employees, transit riders, and anybody else that is a stakeholder from the City of Toronto. And I agree to a certain extent, but I'm nowhere convinced about this upload by the provincial government, most especially because there is no transparency. The province has not mentioned anything about improving the reliability of the subway system as a reason for their desire to take control. That's a bit concerning. Instead, the Premier and the Transportation Minister have almost exclusively mentioned about how this will be great for enabling expansion in Ontario. We owe transit riders transparency. Some transit riders are never going to care about which government owns the subway trains they ride, so long as it gets them to their destinations. And not everyone sits on a crowded subway and thinks, you know what, who owns this transit system? That's not the thoughts of many riders, no matter how crowded it is. But transit riders just want improved service and a local platform that allows them to express concerns and their suggestions. Well, what is the answer to improved service? I believe the solution is to fund the system adequately, keep public transit publicly owned, keyword publicly, operated and maintained. There are too many words from the province left undefined at this point. It's not clear how the whole process might translate to better service. Promises are always the easy part promises are always the easy part, no matter who owns the subway, but plans to spend billions on lines tomorrow do not keep the trains running today, and that is a fact. We owe local transit riders information on this considered upload. We need to make it very clear to citizens in every possible way we can. If the province wants to take over the transit system, I believe they should at least have a plan, and it should not be questionable. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Question from Councillor Carroll.
So I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. You don't want whomever we're sending the table to keep talking about this unless they're also talking about the base existing system today.
Yes.
I think that's clear, Patience. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Derek Moran. Derek Moran? I haven't seen Derek Moran this morning. Okay, we'll move on then. Last but not least then is Helen Lee. Okay, please come up.
I have a PowerPoint to supplement my deputation. And
A PowerPoint. Yeah, so yes, we could have somebody help you hook up your laptop if that's. Is there
audio in it? Is there audio in your presentation? No. So while we're waiting for tech support to be properly set up, I just want to say good morning and thank you for the honor and privilege of deputing here at Executive Committee. It's my first time here. And I'm also recovering from a cold, so you'll excuse me from sounding a little nasal. I've been trying to drink tea.
So we'll have to get your advice very shortly about whether we can have this or whether you proceed without it.
I can proceed without it. We'll just lack the visual kind of impact. Is that working?
Yeah, we can certainly distribute it if you send it to us after your deputation. I think we should move forward. Yep. Maybe it'll come on while we're chatting here. I'll start the clock. Thank you.
I've provided the PDF to the clerk, and all the members can review it afterwards. All right. So, okay. Okay, good morning. My name is Helen Lee. Full disclosure, I'm a board member of the transit advocacy group TTC Riders, but I speak today as a professional advocate and veteran transit rider. I will start by telling you a bit about my TTC journey and why I care about the city manager's report. Then I will share my position on the upload and how I would like the committee to vote. I was born and raised in Toronto. Since the age of 12, the TTC has been my better way of getting around this fair city. It never stood for take the car. After being in 2 vehicular collisions, one as a passenger and one as a pedestrian who was hit by a dump truck, I never considered driving in Toronto to be safe. Not as safe as taking the TTC. Now, I have experienced the full spectrum of TTC service, from absolute fun to absolutely frustrating. My frustration drove me to major in city studies at the University of Toronto Scarborough. It was there I learned why Toronto has a world-class transit system without the world-class funding. To sum up, over 30 years of inadequate subsidies and abdication of responsibility from all 3 levels of government. It also drove me to join a fledgling transit advocacy group called TTC Riders, and I've been a proud member since 2012. By day, I'm a social justice paralegal with a focus on housing law. By night, I advocate for both tenants and transit riders in Toronto. I'm a professional advocate on the clock and off the clock. It's what I do. Transit advocacy in Toronto is not an easy job, and I do it as a volunteer. I'm not driven by money, but the desire to fight for an accessible and affordable transit system for my fellow riders. In 2019, I have expanded my mission to include fighting for transit justice. I have taken up the fight because the bully in Queen's Park thinks Toronto can be broken up into parts and sold to the lowest bidder. So I don't understand why you continue to use the term upload. The fact that the city manager uses quotation marks for upload indicates massive uncertainty and skepticism of what it actually means. The bully in Queen's Park does not know what upload means. Myth: the province and Metrolinx will build transit faster in Toronto. Facts: the TTC does a decent job building and maintaining Toronto's transit system on its shoestring budgets. Fact: adequate subsidies will enable the TTC to build transit faster, to catch up with this massive capital repair backlog, among other things. And the TTC, and another fact, which I think is really important, the TTC has been around for 98 years. Metrolinx has been around for 13 years. The bully in Queen's Park has been there for less than a year. So I think just based on experience alone, TTC city employees know what they're doing, and it's insulting to insinuate otherwise. I know what upload means. It means wholesale takeover and theft of public assets that belong to Toronto. Assets that have commercial air rights and development potential that are attractive to the bully's friends, and we all know how much he likes to help his friends. To the executive committee, I ask that you direct the city manager to approach negotiations this way. 1, the city does not have to approach discussions in good faith, as the province proposed the upload in bad faith. 2, you don't have to disclose information immediately. A legal tactic is to delay, to adjourn. Based on the terms of reference, reasonable time for the sharing information is 15 business days. That's not a long time, especially in a legal environment. In the court system, these things take time. The disclosure process takes time. 15 business days to me is an insufficient amount of time. You also have the ability to walk away if the province is not willing to respect Toronto, the TTC, and its position. 3rd, the public deserves to know what upload actually means. So I ask that you support the motion from Councillors Layton and Matlow to hold an extensive public consultation process about this subject. You know, as a paralegal, I've negotiated good settlements for my clients, so we can have further discussions if you'd like further suggestions, if you want further suggestions.
I'll ask you to conclude in just a few seconds if you can.
Okay. So I had a visual where I basically listed all the members of executive committee and what their Canadian military equivalents would be based on years of service. You were the general, though technically it should be Councillor Nunziata based on her years of service to Toronto alone. You know, the upload has all the signs of a bad deal, where Toronto will suffer if, you know, the City Council, Executive Committee does not step in and lead.
All right. We'll thank you on that note. We've gone to 5:40 here, and appreciate your contribution. Are there any questions of the deputy? All right. Thank you very much for being here today. Much appreciated. Okay, that would then bring us to questions of staff, and we'll start with Councillor Perks.
Thank you. I guess this is to the city manager. So the terms of reference that have been brought here, do they in any way bind the provincial representatives from sharing information we give to them with the provincial cabinet?
Through the chair, does it bind them in any way?
Does it say that they can't share the information with?
No, it doesn't say that.
Okay. Now, cabinet is, you know, in law, the actual government of the province of Ontario. Is there a symmetrical freedom on your part to share anything you learned through that process with the government of Toronto?
No, there's no reason why, unless there is some other matter they bring to my attention where I, you know, could be violating privacy or other laws. But generally speaking, though, our intent here is to be very transparent with each other. And so to answer your question specifically, I would expect that I'd be able to share with you what they've provided me.
Okay. And just to be clear, maybe there's someone from legal or clerks here. The actual body that is the government of the City of Toronto, as defined in sections 131 through 134 of the City of Toronto Act, is council, not a particular member of council or committee of council. So the body you would be sharing it with would be all of council.
Through the chair, of course.
Okay. To the clerk or somebody, when council is given information in confidence, we have a provision that allows us, even if there are consequences or risks, to decide to make that information public. It's at our discretion.
Yeah, well, if I can answer on behalf of clerks, I mean, the answer is correct.
Thank you. In the terms of reference, there are or in the agreement that's proposed here, there are 3 options that are considered at various degrees of upload. Often in conversations like this, there's another option that's considered, which is to compare any of those to doing nothing. Does the current agreement propose that as one of the things that will be studied and compared to other models?
Through the chair, and if I can, I just want to qualify, do nothing in this particular case is the transit system as it presently exists, where the ownership is clear, the operation's clear, the maintenance is clear, all of that is clear. And I would add to that, so is the funding arrangement is clear. So I mean, if that's the definition of do nothing, that isn't fully covered, I think, in what we call Stream 3. However, I do want to say this, and I think the delegates certainly seem to pick up on it as well. There's nothing stopping us, I think, in Stream 3 from saying that the system should be kept in our ownership, stay with us in terms of operating and maintenance, but yet still have an opportunity under Stream 3 to discuss revenue options and other governance stuff. So it's kind of one step different from a fully pure do nothing.
Okay. Does Stream 3 match in your mind the position taken twice by council, once last term and once again in December of this term, that we oppose the transfer of assets as a council altogether. Is that?
That was certainly our intent through the chair, I think, with this option here, with, though, the ability to be at the table to see whether or not we can negotiate a different funding arrangement in order to sustain the asset that we presently own and the asset that we'd like to expand. Okay. So that's the intent.
Final question, and I'm not sure that you would know this, Mr. Murray, because you weren't here, but if memory serves, City of Toronto and the TTC have previously jointly run public campaigns through advertising on transit vehicles, for example, around the need to clear the capital backlog that I think took place in 2003-04, where we had that mountain of vehicles that we needed. Was there anyone, maybe Mr. Farag remembers, or?
I can try to answer that for you, Councillor. Specifically the question?
So the city and the TTC have previously run joint campaigns about the need for the province to invest differently or in vehicles or things like that as a pressure tactic to try to get the province to support the needs of the transit system.
That is correct.
And the Board of Trade was a partner, that's right.
Enough is not enough.
And if I recall, we were successful in getting that money.
And that was your final question.
I would have to go back. I would have to go back and reference and look at my files, but probably yes.
Thank you, Councillor Perks. Questions of staff, Councillor Carroll?
Thank you. Yeah, to be fair, Councillor Perks went further back than Mr. Ross. The concerns that we hear from the deputants are really reflective of the concern about the system as it exists today. But it's hard for them to get comfort from the documents. We always, when they say, here's a principle, for instance, all the for instances and all of the messaging when we're hearing from anyone in the province is, for instance, if we were building a new line. So without, I'm not trying to get you to divulge what you can't divulge, but how hard is it to get these people to talk about the current system as it exists today? They're not comfortable with a conversation that isn't going to be focused on improving the base system. Is that a conversation topic that appears on agendas, that gets any time dedicated to it?
So I'll start. I think through the chair, I mean, as is hopefully evident by our report, I mean, our terms of reference were approved last month, and we had committed to you in December we'd be back at the end of the first quarter. And so just to hit our time commitment, that's why we're here today. So in many respects, what's in front of you is very conceptual in nature, and I think I hear very clearly from what the constituents are saying is that they would like a lot more details about what do these options really entail, and so because therein lies the devil, and is what specifically, and to the comment about why we put quotation marks around upload, it's going to become more and more evident what upload really means. And so it's what we're hearing, I think, here today is they want to understand specifics around what these options really entail. And I would only say to you that given where we are in this process, we're not there yet where we can in the kind of detail I think the audience here and the community in general wants to hear and you want to hear. So we're working through that. Those are the kinds of conversations we're starting to have. That's why we're starting to share information and to, help inform them as to what they're really getting into if they want to consider this notion of upload.
Right. And there is a real push, we heard it from the very first deputation on the public would have more comfort if they were looking at Michael Lindsay's report. And if we're still in this sort of nebulous nailing down the guiding principles in terms of reference, I can't help thinking that perhaps that report is nebulous enough that there's no reason why the public couldn't have a look at it. Is it, has that ever been discussed? How much are you planning to give to the public so that when we go back to the city where we have meetings like this, where we always make our sausage in public, that we will be able to give as many details as possible to them? Is there any discussion of how do we get Michael Lindsay's report out into the open?
So, again, through the chair, the report I think people are referencing is information that was shared with Cabinet. I believe that's what we're talking about.
Yes.
So there is a certain, not unique to our situation, but reports to Cabinet tend to be confidential. So in nature, not unique to this, but in general, that's the nature. So, our goal here is to be as profoundly transparent as possible in terms of, what these options amount to and what we're going to evaluate, what the analysis means, and hopefully people are taking from our intent in our report that the consultation, and it was Councillor Fletcher with the support of Council and the Mayor that added the word meaningful. So our intent here is to be as specific as we possibly can. We can certainly ask, Michael Lindsay is whether or not that report could be made available, assuming there is one.
Yes. Just one other question, Mr. Mayor, and that is, in the absence of knowing where he went for research, do you have your staff looking at research in other cities where there are both provincial and federal governance issues that sort of go in the direction of the three different streams here? Are we doing other city research in places like Sydney, New York, et cetera?
Yeah, through the chair, I mean, that would be essential, I think, for any conversation about upload.
So that is already happening?
That's what we're going to be doing.
Fantastic.
Thanks, Councillor Carroll. Other visiting members of council that are not members of the committee wanting to ask questions of staff? Okay, then I think we could move to the members of the committee who wish to ask questions of staff. Councillor Nunziata.
Yes, thank you. To the city manager, all the deputants that we heard today was very concerned about the consultation process and extending the consultation process. So can you just give us, in your report on page 8, just outline what your recommendation is and what the difference is from 312?
So, I mean, again, I think, our attempt here was to round out all the types of engagement that we would be applying. So obviously we are talking public meetings, and I mean I can read this off in the record, but I mean the bottom line here I think is our intent was to be as transparent and as engaging as we can with this community on the options being considered, how they're going to be evaluated, what kind of analysis is going to be taking place, and how this is going to inform the decision in as transparent a manner as possible. So, I mean, to say, are we open to anything to improve what we've already written in concept? I mean, of course. I mean, if there's something that we haven't maybe enunciated the way that would certainly support this committee or council, then we're obviously open to whatever that would be.
Possibility of us adding further consultative, right? Do you recall in 1998 when we amalgamated, when the province forced us to amalgamate 6 cities, and the mayors, former mayors, including myself, we had a referendum vote. Everyone in the city voted for the against the amalgamation. Do you recall at that time, and everything was downloaded to the municipalities, what was downloaded as far as TTC to the municipality?
So I may.
And now they're uploading, so tell.
Right, I may need some help here. Actually, if I could ask Mr. Fragg to just remind us all what happened.
Certainly. Prior to amalgamation, the provincial government funded 75% of the cost of capital costs related to the TTC.
Hear you. There's something wrong with your mic. Yeah.
Yes. Prior to amalgamation, the provincial government funded 75% of the capital costs of the TTC, and the balance was funded through Metro, former Metro. In addition to that, the provincial government funded 50% of the operating subsidy that was required to operate the TTC on an annual basis.
Thank you, Councillor Nunziata. Other members of the committee wishing to ask questions of staff? Councillor Thompson, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the city manager. Ms. Burke-Wood had concerns with respect to the issues around governance, and you heard her comments. I'm just wondering if there's anything that you could add to perhaps help to enhance that concern that she had expressed in her presentation.
So if I can, through the chair, so I think a lot of what she said does afford us an opportunity in the options, and in particular option 3, to explore exactly what she's talking about. So, you know, and again, I think where we started with the negotiations with the province, you know, which I would say in the very beginning, they were very, if you will, almost laser focused in what it is they were trying to accomplish. We did manage, by being at the table, to broaden the consideration to allow us to have the kinds of, you know, ideas put on the table that the first deputant provided. So I would say it's, could it be further, you know, enunciated over the, you know, the days and weeks ahead? I would say absolutely. So it's, but I think the intent of the third option is to capture some of those opportunities.
And that's a reason why I asked you the question, because initially when this was suggested or proposed, it was rather narrow.
Absolutely.
And so you broadened that. So with respect to some of the concerns that we've heard from the public here today, you are actually trying to expand this discussion to include more opportunities and options for us, so that if we were to consider, it would be something that's in our best interests.
Through the chair, absolutely.
Right. Now, with respect to Mr. Lindsay's report, and you have expressed that this is a report to cabinet, and I realize that you have nothing to do with that and so on, but would you have a problem if a motion was brought forward that suggests or requests or asks the provincial government to release such information? Of course, it would be helpful to you, because then it would be afforded to the public at large to be able to review detailed information that you have, because you've indicated that you're prepared to release information that you have within the limitation that allows you to release such information if you are able to.
Right. Through the chair, I'd have no problem with.
Okay, so I have such a motion coming forward, so hopefully we can support that. And then just the, I guess my final question, recognizing the authority that the province has. So would I be correct to say that the province could simply have come to the city to suggest that they were taking the subway system without any discussion? Is that a possibility?
Through the chair, absolutely.
Right. So there is an opportunity now, obviously, to engage, and you have expanded that greatly with respect to the stream 3 on page 6 to really broaden this discussion. So I would think we've come a long way vis-a-vis what was initially proposed. Would you agree?
Through the chair, I would say yes, and I would add to that the consultation component as well is different from where I believe we started.
Right. Thank you. There's no further questions, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor Thompson. Are there other members of the committee wishing to ask questions of staff? Deputy Mayor Bylaw.
Thank you. I want to ask some questions around the consultation, because I heard from deputants, and I feel that the report talks a little bit about the consultation, but doesn't really give us information about timelines, for example. And this is an issue that I think everybody feels is moving quite fast. And so I think it'd be important to have some timelines. And I know that you're working on this. Is this something that you could report back to us either at council, or have a report a little bit more detailed on the kinds of consultations that is going to happen?
Through the chair, yes.
You could do that? You'd be okay giving us the dates of meetings, how you're planning to do that, and a timeline on how these consultations are going to unfold?
Through the chair, as we get further into this and we're able to kind of, manage everyone's expectations and provide deadlines, we will absolutely do that.
So, but I'm going to place a motion to have this reported to council.
Fine.
With this item. You'd be fine with that?
Yeah.
Okay. There was also a question about having consultations with the transit union. Is that part of the plan as well, of consultations?
No, I mean,
Is that one
certainly,
of the stakeholders?
if I can through the chair, I mean, obviously, I'm in a good position that as a co-lead on this, I have the CEO of the TTC. So in terms of, and he's the person that I look to having the relationship with the union. So, you know, again, I'm not going to speak for him. So if Rick wishes to answer the question as you've raised it, then by all means.
If I could have that answer from the TTC chair, is the union one of the stakeholders that will be at the table as part of the consultation?
Through you, Chair, when more information becomes available from the consultation that takes place, I will be reaching out to the union and having discussions with them.
Okay. With the report asks for $2 million. I mean, to have robust consultations and to engage the city and to advertise all these things, even though we have some methods, you need some funds. Do you feel that the $2 million will be enough to cover a robust consultation and public engagement campaign?
Again, through the chair, I mean, that's been built into that figure along with the solicitor that we're talking about, and some other kind of analysis or investigative work, not unlike what was raised earlier. So we believe at this time, but we also, if need be, we will come back. But I mean, I think we've tried to establish a budget that we feel can cover the scope of work that we need to undertake at this phase. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Bylaw. Are there other members of the committee wishing to ask questions of staff? Okay. Then it is time for speakers, and we'll start, of course, with our visiting members of council, and I see Councillor Perks is ready to go.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thanks especially to all the people who came out to share their views today. Thanks also, I see from a communication that several thousand Torontonians have written into the Executive Committee urging this committee and council to stand fast and oppose the upload of the TTC. It's not often we get thousands of communications on a single item, so thank you to all of you who've been working on that. I want to spend a moment to talk about this notion that we should be doing consultations. One thing that I have learned, being an elected official, if you have a consultation, but you don't tell everybody all the information at the consultation, it's a fake consultation. And people resent you for it, and they don't trust you, and they don't believe in the consultation, and they don't believe in the outcome. The only way you can have a real consultation with the public is if you share all the information. And in this instance, I'm not clear that that's going to happen. So, you know, I'm deeply concerned that we would even consider going to Torontonians and saying, we can't tell you what's going on, but what's your opinion? That's just wrong. I mean, can you imagine getting the polling question? Do you like option 1, 2, or 3 best? I mean, if I got that polling question today, I wouldn't know. You might as well ask me to explain the mathematics behind Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. I know it about as well as that. So I think that if our principle is transparency, we have to make our consultation process about sharing information with the public as the first step, and sharing all the information, including this so-called cabinet document that lays out what their outcomes are. Without that document in hand, I don't even know what game I'm playing. That's the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing I wanted to say is that Toronto has had, since amalgamation, an endless conversation about who does what, who pays for what, and who's in charge. And at times, council has been courageous in that conversation, and at times we haven't been. I can remember during the first 2 terms of the post-amalgamation council, then Mayor Mel Lastman used to every year, every single year, when the budget came in front of his council, he would have 200 million or 150 million that wasn't balanced. And he would go on television and say, the province has to pay this piece, it's for the TTC. You might remember those days. He would have press conferences. He used some very colorful language to describe Premier Mike Harris, and he was able to get $100 million, $150 million. I remember one year he got over $200 million for public transit. And eventually we got tired as a city of doing these one-off bailouts for the public transit system. And the next mayor who came along ran a public campaign with ads on bus shelters, ads on subways, ads on the radio. The Board of Trade got involved, the TTC. The mayor was having press conferences with civic leaders saying other orders of government have to come to the table and fund the TTC. And you know what? We also took them to court. The TTC took the federal government to court saying we shouldn't be paying the GST on our purchases as a commission anymore. We won that. We got the federal government for the first time to agree to buying buses. We got the provincial government to agree to build what is now the largest civic works project in the country, which is the Eglinton Light Rail line. We got the provincial government to give us a share of the gas tax to pay for transit. When we stand up as a city, led by a mayor who's willing to fight, we can actually make the province and the federal government come to the table. And that's what I'm hearing Torontonians tell us they want us to do. So let's not go out and poll people on a bunch of stuff that, frankly, nobody knows what it's about. Let's go out and tell Torontonians about the great transit system we could have if other orders of government came to the funding table. And yeah, if we want to talk a little bit about how expansion works and who pays for that and who does what, we can have that conversation too. But that conversation, without talking about the federal and provincial governments coming to the table with money, is a waste of time. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Perks. Councillor Carroll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can't for the life of me understand why the provincial government wants to do this by keeping everybody calm with polls. He should really just pick up the phone and call David Cameron and tell him how that works out. So I think he can tell us. I want to read a small passage. This is written by a councillor in Sydney, where New South Wales has taken over key parts and made a mess of building the new lines and done nothing much for the base system. This is the councillor. Forget the exemplary bus service we all preferred. Residents of my electorate now have to leave buses mid-journey to battle their way onto a tram system that has, for some reason, no bigger passenger capacity. That, as we know, is not necessarily have to be the case with LRT. Lousy process explains it. Clean out seasoned middle managers from the public sector and you lose corporate memory. Someone forgets to tell bidders what pipes and wires lie under the road surface. As a result, you end up facing a $600 million in compensation to the complaining contractor. You rush planning approvals so that halfway through construction, you realize the line obstructs road access to a hospital emergency ward. Now the government that designed that light rail is in a dash to approve the Northern Beaches Tunnel, estimated at $14 billion, and burdened with a mess of public policy implications about tolls, traffic planning, densification of development to pay for it on Sydney's northern beaches for its 300,000 population, when we know that any cost-benefit analysis would tell you to go to Sydney's Greater West, where there are 3 million people. That's the chaos that is unfolding in Sydney as a result of roughly what's being suggested here. That's roughly the structure between New South Wales and Sydney. And I keep harping on, are we looking at the other cities? Did Michael Lindsay look at the other cities, or did he just was he just assigned, please make a business case for us taking over the system so that we can P3 the building of new lines? That may be why they came to the table, but if we are not at that table because we are desperately underfunded on our basic system, and that is the only reason we've come to the table to fix that problem, if that's not the reason we're there, then no one wins. No one wins here. We will all end up paying bills. What's happened now in Sydney is councillors are relegated to just figuring out parking problems. around stations and having no control over little things like, hey, inside the station, yes, we have our ticket takers, but are we allowed, please, provincial government, to change the signs and deal with larger font for seniors? They actually have to ask permission to do things like that. There is so much minutia to be worked out here, and the speed with which this government is moving, and the amount of hand padding and the amount of times we're being told that everything is fine, even from some of our own fellow councillor colleagues, read the Toronto Sun op-ed, is really concerning. It is very concerning. And so we have to look at item number 12. We know the province isn't going to give the airing that it needs to give to the community, just to put their concerns on the table, just so that they can say, it's not that we want to lie down in front of the bulldozer. The system we have today is far from perfect. But please solve these problems. Please don't be singularly focused on the building of a new line. If you're at this table together, solve my everyday rider problems, please, or don't even have this conversation. That's why they want a consultation. I have no doubt about that. That's the people here and my own local constituency who if I'm honest, are some of the luckiest constituents in the city, because they've got their own special Sheppard Subway line, they've got 2-minute headway Don Mills bus, they've got everything they need in a short trip to Yonge Street, and still they're desperately afraid that the system that exists today is going to just get worse. And so we've got to have the consultation that we know will far outstrip anything that could happen in a Queen's Park Standing Committee. If we don't, I'm already making plans to, at the very least, have it in my own new supersized Don Valley North Ward. I'll have my own transit roundtable if this city isn't going to do it, because my residents want to talk about the system they're riding right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Carroll. Other members of council, not members of the Executive Committee, wishing to speak? Okay. Turning then to members of the committee. Councillor Thompson, Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I do have a motion, and if staff can put it up, I think it's ready. So the motion is it's there. I think you can read it. I don't know whether or not we would get this information, but I think it is appropriate and prudent for us to at least ask. If we don't ask, we more than likely won't get it. So I'm asking for it. So while we may not get it, we have nonetheless asked, and then perhaps there would be rationale and reasons as to why we're not getting it and why we can't get it. And then we will perhaps go a little further in that. I want to thank all the people who have actually come out here this morning to express their views on this and so on. I know it was very clear with respect to the first deputant, Ms. Burke-Wood, and the folks from Code Red TO. She talks about the governance, and I think we've, through the questions for the city manager, I think he's responded to that very well. Let me first say that when this first came forward from the province in terms of the request to upload and to take over ownership of the subway network, I, like everyone else, was wondering, what does that mean? How will that work? Will it be that we will have better funding? Will it be that we will have expansion of the system to address the challenges and the need that exists in this city and so on? At this point, I don't know that. None of us do. But what we do have, though, I think, which is, a testament to the city managers and the team, their good work, they have not simply rest with this idea of uploading the network. They have gone beyond that to look at a much broader discussion, which is part of what we see in item number 3 here of the stream that's on page 6. And I think that if that's the basis of the discussion, it's a lot more wholesome, it's a lot more helpful, and of course the recognition that the public and all of us as members of council need information to be able to form our opinion, to respond, And at the appropriate time, we will take whatever action that's necessary as it related to Mr. Cartwright's comment about a campaign and what that campaign would look like, and what is it that we're campaigning for, and what is it that we're going to be campaigning against. We have to understand all of that information for us to form our perspective and our opinion. Clearly, we all want a better system. We want a system that works and addresses the need of all transit users in the City of Toronto. I mean, we heard from the lady from Scarborough who talked about, you know, the racialized component of people getting to work and the costs and all of the things. Those are all important elements to our discussion. It's not just the notion of just simply building the lines. But what is the social and the people impact? How does that impact people? How does that sort of relate to the daily, you know, movements? Mr. Cartwright talked about his mom. You know, my first experience on the TTC was with my mother as well. And unfortunately, it was back in the day when you had two-fare system from Eglinton to Scarborough. When you get to Don Mills, you had to put another fare. And I remember that vividly because I got slapped on the hand because I put all the money in at once. And so that was a challenge and so on. So, you know, the TTC is an entity that we all love. And in spite of the fact that we are critical of it and you know, overcrowding and all the things that, and the pressure that it has and it's facing on a daily basis, we all have a vested interest to ensure that it works. And we want to communicate that certainly to the province and provincial leaders in terms of who we're talking about taking it over. The question is, what does taking it over or what does uploading the subway system actually means? I don't know. And I think that's what we need to find out. I have every confidence in the city manager and the approach that he's brought for us here today, and the fact that he's changed the alignment of the stream, because we're not just talking about subway network uploading, we're talking about a whole series of things as part of the options to be discussed with respect to the process that's in play. But I do think, and we all need more information to help us to be much more informed in terms of what it is that we're going to be dealing with and the decisions that we make thereafter. So, Mr. Mayor, I'm hoping that folks will vote on supporting my motion, and those are all my remarks. Thank you.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Thompson. You want to speak, or do you have any questions of the mover? You want to speak? You're most welcome to speak, Councillor Pasternak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is so major with so many holes in it. We just really don't know where we're going. But I can tell you, as someone who had a member of the family living in New York City for many years, I followed some of the politics that went on between Albany and New York City, and that is a cross-jurisdictional subway system. And I can tell you that it was one of the biggest impediments to making that subway system flow effectively, get the proper state of good repair, making sure that politics was excluded from the dialogue. And the wars between Albany and New York City have been going on for years because of a cross-jurisdictional subway system. I think at the end of the day, you can look at the Crosstown that's under construction now, scheduled to open in 2022, and of course the completed UP Express, which I've ridden. And those are case studies in which the province can come into the City of Toronto, build transit at their expense, and then have it either co-operated or operated exclusively by the city. If we're looking at barriers to getting transit done, it's mostly provincial statute. It's the Planning Act, it's rules governing expropriation, it's the long road to environmental assessments. These are the barriers to getting transit done in a quick and effective way. And of course, funding formula. They can't expect Toronto to do it off the tax base. But at the end of the day, when I see this report, it is much better and prudent and safer for the City of Toronto to be at the table and rather than to just walk away. This is going to be a long, hard process. You're talking about a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure transit system with adjoining real estate, and it's going to be very complicated, and it's the consequences of these negotiations are going to affect the city for generations. So while I support Council's directive that this is something we should not support, if there's a negotiation, I think it would be folly to walk away from it. We've got to be there. We've got to hear what they have to say, and we have to get clarity on what this really means. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Pasternak. Who else do we have lined up to speak? Councillor Nunziata, I had you down. Thank you.
Thank you. Just speak briefly. First of all, I want to thank all the deputants that came today. And I think all the deputants, when they made their presentations, we agree, and I think we're all on the same page. We made that perfectly clear in May 2018, where we did move that motion at council to the province, but not uploading TTC. There was, I know there was a lot of discussion about the consultation meetings, and looking at the report from the city manager, and Councillor Carroll mentioned in her ward, but if you look at the report, it does say public meetings in all the community councils. So that is part of the recommendation. And you can add more on it if you'd like, but I do support that report, and I do support the report from the city manager. You know, in 1998, I'm going to go back to 1998, when we amalgamated in 6 mayors, the 6 municipalities, and we opposed the amalgamation. All the mayors opposed it, including Barbara Hall and Mal Lastman. All the mayors opposed it, and we spoke to the province and the premier at the time, Mike Harris, and we expressed our concerns. We weren't sure what they were going to download to us and who was going to do what at that time. There was a lot of confusion, and at that time, the mayors, we did a referendum vote, and all the 6 mayors did a referendum vote. Spent thousands and thousands of dollars on the vote. It was unanimous. No one, the vote was not to amalgamate. We amalgamated. At that time, there was not an opportunity, we were not given the opportunity for the mayors to sit down with the premier of the day to talk about and be at the table. What I'm very pleased about today is, even though one of the deputants made a comment about that we should walk away, I don't think we should walk away. I think it's very important that we're at the table and we're part of that dialogue. Absolutely, we need to be there and bring forward our comments and concerns. And so I'm just hoping that in the Councillor Thompson's motion, I support that motion, and I'm hoping that we would be able to get that information and whatever information that we need to be made public. So I think that the motions that we have today that I would be supporting, and hopefully, and through the consultation meetings, and I'm just hoping that the public does come out to these meetings, because past experiences, whenever you have public meetings, you send out notices, thousands of notices, and you don't get the public out to participate. So it's very important that they do participate and give input. So those are my comments, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to staff, and thank you to the deputants.
Thank you, Councillor Nunziata, and Deputy Mayor Bylaw to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple of motions, and I think some of the deputants said it really well, is that this is a negotiation. As much as we weren't really willing and are not willing to negotiate, and some people try to say that it's not fair, because the fact is the city is a creature of the province, right? And they didn't have to invite us for the table, some people say, and the truth is we don't even really know what upload really means. We also have some very good things on our side, is that we have the people of Toronto, we have Torontonians that believe in public transit and believe in good public transit and investments in public transit, and we have the knowledge. We have the knowledge that the province doesn't have, and I think we need to use that to position ourselves and to position the conversation. I think we can very clearly go out with Torontonians and talk about the funding that is needed. The fact that whatever the negotiations ends up, we need to make sure that our buses are still running on time, that are coming with the frequency that we want, that nothing is going to affect the kind of service that we have to Torontonians, actually, that it should improve the services that we have for Torontonians. And these are the things that we need to put out, the information, the knowledge that we have, how certain actions could actually impact the service. We need to share that with Torontonians. And so I think that the consultations that we need to have need to be hand in hand with this public awareness and public campaign that needs to happen. I have 2 motions in here. I don't think we have enough information on the consultation process in front of us. That's why I asked the city manager to go next week directly to council. We need a timeline. Things are moving fast. We need to understand what's going on. We need to put a timeline on how these things are going. And I'm asking that the motion that was placed on the public campaign goes directly to council as well, so that we can have the 2 being put together, because we need a very strong public awareness campaign to feed into these consultations. We do need Torontonians to be engaged in this conversation. We need Torontonians to understand what is at stake, and we need Torontonians to be on our side. And to be whatever, how the negotiation proceeds, we need them to be hand in hand and locked with how we're going to deal with this. They're our best allies, and they are the people that we need to stand up for and to stand up with in this process. And therefore, I am hoping that I can get everybody's support to ensure that we have strong, robust consultations, and that we engage Torontonians in the conversation as well, to have the best outcome, not only for TTC riders, but for the whole city of Toronto.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Am I correct that you also had another motion that you wanted to move, which is, did you move this one as well? Motion B? Yeah. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Menon Wong.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to speak to the first 3.1 first. I'm happy to support that report. There was one of the deputies, the recommendations, who I think got it right when she said most people, they just want to get from point A to point B. They don't actually really care who runs the system. It's about traveling. And I think, in forums like these and other consultations, there's a certain level of political theater, and people want to take some swings at the provincial government, but that's just, that's part of the process and the environment that we live in. Let me say also that, I'm no fan of Metrolinx, the folks that brought us Presto. The Union Pearson Express has been a financial disaster, and the Crosslinks arrangement, they aren't exactly user-friendly to councillors or their communities. However, I would like to speak to Councillor Matlow's virtuous motion about getting all the facts. So you got to be really careful about this if you're telling the truth. And the truth is, there's a lot of responsibility to go around, and if we actually really wanted to talk about the facts of who runs transit well, and we've got to look at ourselves in the mirror, and we're always not going to see a pretty picture. And the examples that I will give you is the financial disaster of the TYSSE, not our finest moment. We're going to be getting a report on automatic train control in the coming weeks from the TTC. And that's not going to be the most positive report either. And if someone read that, someone would be saying, yes, upload it tomorrow. Just last week, we talked about fare evasion and we're losing more than, and this is a conservative number, over $64 million a year because we can't properly collect fares. Those are just 3 examples. Councillor Matlow always talks about fact-based decisions and wanting to have all the information out on the table. Got to be careful about that. If we're going to have a campaign, he wants to get the full story out, both sides have to come out. And I think within this discussion, we should be focusing on not just saying the TTC is better than everything else, or not because we want to save union jobs. We have to focus in on what is the best arrangements that we can negotiate on behalf of the transit riding public and the taxpayers, where we can build more transit and we can deliver the service better.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Are there others wishing to speak? I will speak at the end, but if there's anybody else going once? Okay, I have Madam Clerk has just given me my tiny little friendly amendment rather to Deputy Mayor Bylaw's motion to. Oh, the first thing you have that. Can we just extend past 12:30 to finish this item, which we will? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And I have a motion which is a tiny friendly amendment to Deputy Mayor Bylaw's motion, which just includes, as you can see, if we'll just put it up, the feasibility that we asked the city manager about the feasibility of including a meeting with stakeholders in the consultation plan, because I thought that was a useful, positive suggestion made by at least one of the deputies this morning. So, Madam, I think I'm addressing the Speaker. I am just chairing the meeting. I'll just say how delighted I was to hear Councillor Perks refer to the so fondly to the days of great transit advocacy under Mayor Lastman. And I say that because I was there. I was actually asked to go to those meetings between Mayor Lastman and Mr. Harris because both of them trusted me to be there to try to see if we could reach some resolution that was in the best interest of Toronto transit riders. And for all the great commendation we heard this morning about how wonderful that all was, the fact of the matter is that what we got out of that, I'm pretty clear in my recollection, was a couple of fairly substantial loans from the province for transit. And the reason I recall that is because when I got here as mayor, all those years later, I was here as mayor working with my colleague, Councillor Crawford, the budget chief, when the province said, oh, by the way, we want those loans repaid now. I'm not sure if it was with interest or not. And I remember the very same councillor who spoke so fondly of those arrangements here this morning was a harsh critic of mine when we actually put arrangements in place to repay the loans, which involved us having to make some arrangements to, to spread that out over time because we were so burdened down by having to pay back, I think it was $100 million of the loans at that time. And so $200 million in loans. Okay, thank you, Councillor Nunziata. That just proves how successful, in quotes, we were at those meetings. And so I would say, and when I heard so fondly as well about the past days, I thought to myself, well, it's very interesting because in those days we had exactly nothing to speak of, any consistent funding at all from the federal government. And today, with the methods that I choose to use, which is as far as you possibly can go, with thoughtful, considerate, consistent, persistent meetings with the other governments, we have billions of dollars in hand and a transit program that I'm trying to get extended for another 10 years. So I think you have to be careful to sort of say that the method that worked so well in those fond days is the only method to use, and that the method that sort of says that you at least will go and talk to people and advocate consistently and persistently on behalf of the City of Toronto, that one method works so much better than another. I believe what people expect us to do, the very same people everybody purports to speak on in this room, they expect us to work together as far as we possibly can, work together to get more transit built, to get more support for transit, and they actually expect us to try to do that without huge fights if we possibly can, because they sort of remind us from time to time that we're all sent by the same people with the same objective in mind. So we decided as a council, while declaring our position very clearly in the same motion, to authorize our city manager to go off to the table, having seen a new government of Ontario get elected and campaigning. Unlike what they did with the city council changes, they actually had campaigned on this, and then they got elected. So we authorized our city manager, with our position on the table, to go off and sit at the table. And as the very same city manager pointed out in answer to a question a little earlier on, they had the right, and they still do, to go ahead and do anything they want, basically legally. We have a legal opinion that was made public, so I can talk about it, saying they can do whatever they want without taking into account our thoughts, our views, or anything else. And so, I would say at the time when uploading was discussed in the election, I called it earlier on correctly, I think, a political slogan without a plan attached to it. There was no plan. It was a political slogan saying we're going to upload the subway. So we decided to go to the table with our cards face up, namely right in the resolution authorizing that. We said we want this, the subway to remain in city hands. And so it meant by going, though, we were willing to sit and work together as far as we could And I would say to you, there are two things that have been achieved so far by those who decry this awful process. Keeping in mind what the city manager said earlier on, namely they could have done anything they want. Number one, we got terms of reference that explicitly acknowledged our preferred option, which is no upload, and that is on the table for discussion as part of the terms of reference. And number two, explicit acceptance of the fact that we insisted upon a program of public consultation to go with that, and that is what the city manager has outlined here today, and it's been supplemented by some of the comments of Deputy Mayor Bylaw and others. And so I would say so far you know, we are there at the table, that we haven't yet seen a plan for what uploading is. And I think that it is important we proceed now with what I would call the first, not the last, program of public consultation and information to make sure the public do know what the options are and get their opinions on those and get public opinion generally on these things. And then I can assure you that this is the beginning, not the end. And if we get to the stage where, as Mr. Councillor Thompson, Deputy Mayor Thompson said, we have an actual proposal on the table or an ultimatum that we're either for or against, I'll be the first one to say I'm supportive at that time of a campaign that either supports or opposes something. And I will say in final comment that, as I've said consistently, if it's a good deal for Toronto, I'll support it if there's a deal. If there's a deal that's a bad deal for Toronto, I will oppose it. Because I think that is my job, is to not presuppose that whatever's going to come out of these discussions, because we don't know what it is good or bad or indifferent. I don't know. Maybe they'll come out and say we're not uploading the subway, because that's explicitly in the terms of reference as one of the options. But I can certainly just say that I think what's proposed today is another step forward in the public consultation, and I think that'll be good for the people of Toronto to engage them, as so many people have said this morning they want to see done. So I think on that note, unless there's anybody else who has a word to say, we will proceed to deal with the motions. And we will start with motion item 3.1. We're, of course, dealing with these items together. And that under item 3.1, we have motion 1 by Councillor Deputy Mayor Thompson. We'll just put that up if we could. Asking the province of Ontario to release their report. I'm ready to call the question. All those in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Moving to motion 3 by myself, which is a sort of friendly amendment to Deputy Mayor Bylaw's motion to stakeholder meeting being considered by the city manager. All those in favour? Opposed? Carried. Then we move to item 2A, motion 2A, moved by Councillor Deputy Mayor Bylaw, as amended by motion 3, and I'll ask for a question on that. All those in favour? Opposed? Carried. And that brings us then to the item as amended, item 3.1. as amended. I'll ask the question, call the question. All those in favour? Opposed? Carried. Then we come to item 3.12, and that brings us then first to item 2B, moved by Councillor Deputy Mayor Bylaw, that the item be forwarded to City Council without recommendation. All those in favour? Opposed? Carried. Okay, and that's it for item 3.12 as well. I think that was a good morning's work, and I thank very much all the people who came to be with us this morning. May I just say, after lunch, a little bit out of the order, I think, I've forgotten which order things were actually in, but we're going to deal with item 3.3 right after lunch, because there's some people that have religious observances for today, and we want to get that done in plenty of time. So we'll start with 3.3, the administrative inquiry on hate-sponsored rallies, and we will resume at 1:30.